Chapter 364. The small town gave people a very strange feeling. Each person was tightly wrapped, and not only were they wearing large hoods, they were also wearing all kinds of strange masks. They were in a hurry and didn't talk to anyone. This place was specially built to facilitate the exchange of goods between the villages. Most of the people were from the nearby villages, and these villages were on guard against each other. As for the permanent residents of the town, whether it was the great Zhou country's alchemist or the weapon shop owner, they were all criminals that escaped from various places. Each person was a hidden danger. Who was willing to deal with this kind of person? There was another kind of person hiding in the small town. This kind of person was a hunter, a bandit, or a human trafficker. Their job was to find a suitable village and kill them for profit. The women of the rabbit race, fox race, and elves could all be sold for a good price. As for the dwarves, bears, tigers, and etc., they were all qualified slaves. The Forest of Chaos was rich in resources, and even the smallest village had quite a bit of treasures. Therefore, killing and stealing was the fastest way to get rich. There were no laws or rules here, so who could resist this kind of temptation? Under this layer of danger, a small town in the Forest of Chaos was completely different from a civilized country. It was very dangerous coming here each time. If it wasn't done well, not only would a person's life be in danger, it would even bring a disaster to the entire clan. It was because of this that Chu Tian's group was too eye-catching. The 5 of them did not hide themselves at all and swaggered in like this. Other than the elf who couldn't be judged, the other 4 looked very young and didn't seem very strong, so how could they not attract attention? They were simply pieces of fat meat. When the 5 of them arrived in the small town, they immediately felt over 10 gazes filled with ill intent. Dongfang, go and ask around. Chu Tian ignored the people sharpening their knives in the corner. See if this town has anything we want. Alright. Dongfang Haoran turned around and left. This Dongfang Haoran was the previous Southern Summer King's eldest son and had the chance to become the new king of Southern Summer, but now he had become a member of Miracle Commerce. This was fate playing with people. But Dongfang Haoran did not have any interest in the throne, rather following Miracle Commerce would allow him to have a better growth. This fellow was like an unpolished jade. With a bit of polishing, he would become another calm martial ruler, even surpassing Dongfang Gan. Chu Tian decided to nurture Dongfang Haoran into a general of Miracle Commerce. In the future, he would have to rely on him to lead Miracle Commerce's army. However, Dongfang Haoran was too young. Bringing him along to gain experience was a good thing. Let's find a place to rest. There should be a hotel here. The 4 of them hadn't even taken 2 steps. Stop. A few burly figures stood in front of him, each holding a weapon in their hands. Chu Tian fixed his eyes on them and saw that they were several ferocious-looking people of different races. There were thieves of the rat race and brawny men of the barbarian race. Their leader was a lizard man covered in green scales. Because of the close distance, Chu Tian could even smell the pungent stench coming from the man's body. Chu Tian frowned. What can I do for you? The few of them looked at each other with greed in their eyes. Your goods aren't bad. The lizard man in the lead threw out 3 low-grade source stones and then pointed behind him as he said, I'll buy these 3 women. Take the money and scram. Chu Tian was stunned. What was this? 3 low-grade source stones? That ferocious lizard man stared at Chu Tian. Are you deaf? I've already given you the money and your women are in my hands. If you don't scram, I'll teach you a lesson. Go ask around and see who dares offend us in this small town. Meng Yingying, Vivian, and Chen Bingyu's faces sunk. Although they knew that the atmosphere in the Forest of Chaos was bad, being this rude in broad daylight really made people angry. Although there were many people watching, most of them were just here to watch the show. Chu Tian narrowed his eyes and said, It seems like you don't understand the situation. Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. The lizard man pulled out the blade at his waist and a green spirit energy was released. Then die. Not weak. An illustrious soul realm strength. In this kind of unknown small town, a random small character actually had the strength of the fourth awakened soul layer. No wonder he dared to be this arrogant. The Forest of Chaos' overall strength was much stronger than the small southern summer country. However, he had offended the wrong person. Dang. No one could see what had happened. The lizard man's blade slashed down on the ice crystal-like sword, but the lizard man's blade was instantly broken like tofu. These lizard men were all shocked. This blade was still a high-grade soul weapon, but it was broken upon contact. How was this possible? I want this sword too. The lizard man swept out like an eagle claw, looking like he wanted to take the sword. Chu Tian turned his wrist and the netherworld sword came out of its sheath. The lizard man did not even know what had happened before his entire arm was cut off. He gave a pitiful cry and retreated while holding his arm, but his arm was covered in blue and white netherworld flames. The flames spread quickly, and wherever they passed, the muscles rapidly withered. In just a few seconds, the flames had spread to the entire body. The originally strong man had become as thin as a stick in an instant. Finally, his body broke apart and turned into smoking fragments on the ground. The other lizard men revealed looks of fear when they saw this. They could not understand. Only the small villages around this small town knew about it, so how could a small village like this have such a powerful character? It was too late to run. Chen Bingyu waved her hand and large amounts of crystal-clear snowflakes flew out, instantly entering the lizard men's bodies. Several hundred sharp icicles appeared in these lizard men's bodies, turning them into giant ice porcupines. They did not have the slightest bit of resistance before being killed. Meng Yingying spat out at the corpses on the ground. Even this kind of fellow wants to have ideas about us? This kind of bad person. Even Meng Yingying did not have the slightest bit of pity. The surrounding onlookers revealed looks of dread. Wherever the four of them went, everyone stayed far away, and no one dared to approach them. If they could kill the chicken to warn the monkey and save themselves some trouble, that would be the best. But would the situation be as smooth as Chu Tian imagined? The surrounding people whispered to each other with eyes filled with schadenfreude, preparing to watch a good show. Chu Tian knew that this matter would not be this easy. But even like this, Chu Tian did not need to be afraid. He did not believe that in a small town on the edge of the Forest of Chaos, there was anything that could threaten him. This is considered an inn? Meng Yingying stood in an incomparably simple stone house. It was like several stone balls buried in the ground, with the surface covered in moss and vines. There were even poisonous insects like centipedes and spiders crawling through the cracks. The inside of the small stone house was not much better. Each stone house was completely sealed, and did not even have a single window. There were no lamps. The lighting tools here were made from the liquid of fluorescent insects. Each stone house was less than 2 meters tall and less than 10 square meters in area. It was simply like a dog's kennel. Meng Yingying felt that instead of living in this kind of place, it would be better to set up a tent in the forest. Safety was the most important thing in the Forest of Chaos. Although this house was simple, it was relatively stable. What made Meng Yingying, Vivian, and the others unable to accept was that the inn's boss was an orc. Orcs were a different race from spirit beasts, and there were many of them in the Forest of Chaos. Their typical characteristic was their green skin, incomparably tall bodies, and 2 large fangs. They were even more barbaric than the barbarians. The half-beastman boss was wearing an apron-like pants, and his upper body was covered in scars. 2 short axes hung on his back, and his long hair was tied into dozens of thin braids that draped over his back. His mouth was full of a rancid stench that could make people faint from a distance of 10 feet. On the wall behind him, there were all kinds of marinated demon beast meat that had maggots growing on it. There were also bottles of unknown wine placed in a row. "Do you want to stay here?" The orc spoke in the spirit beast language, 1 low-grade source stone per day. So expensive. Meng Yingying's eyes popped out. One low-grade source stone was equivalent to 1 million gold coins. 5 million gold coins could buy a pretty good inn in southern Xia. You're definitely trying to rip us off because we're outsiders. The orc dug his large nose. Ignoring Vivian and Meng Yingying's disgust, he took out a sticky substance and smeared it on his pants. So what if I'm ripping you off? You can stay if you want. You. Yingying, forget it. Chu Tian didn't want trouble, so he took out 3 low-grade source stones, at most 3. Arrange a room for us. The orc's eyes lit up and he immediately put away the source stones. He revealed a smile. All right, come with me. This green-skinned fellow brought them to a room. Meng Yingying looked at the dirty orc and her heart began to whisper. The orcs were the most notorious race, even worse than the barbarians. Was it really safe to live in their place? After the orc boss took the money, he became much more enthusiastic. At this time, Dongfang Haoren came back. I didn't see any or being sold in the market, they are only trading local specialties. Wouldn't this be a wasted trip? And they were living in this kind of damn place. It's not strange, the refining skills of a small village are low. Even if they found high-level ore, they wouldn't be able to mine it. Even if they could mine it, they wouldn't be able to refine it. Chu Tian shook his head and said, but it's not a wasted trip. At least in this town, we can gather more information or we can find the nearest city in the forest. While they were talking, the orc boss came back. He was holding a dirty plate, enthusiastically placing it in front of them. There was a bottle of wine and several pieces of black beast meat on the plate. The boss wiped his dirty and greasy hands on his equally dirty trousers. His ugly and fierce face grinned, revealing his 2 yellow tusks. Honored guests, please have a taste. This is our Beastman Race's wine, free of charge. You will like it. He personally poured a cup and gave it to Chu Tian. Chu Tian looked at the muddy liquid in the cup and his expression became strange. The orc boss was very angry. In the orc race, refusing a friend's wine is very rude. Old brother, it's fine if you put poison in the wine. Chu Tian said with a look of disdain. Can't you change it to a better wine? This is like shit, who do you expect to drink it? You want to use it to poison us? Do you really think father's brain is full of shit? The orc boss was shocked. He had bought this poison from the town's alchemist. He had promised that it was tasteless and that no one would be able to see through it. There were many guests that had been easily poisoned to death by the orc boss and then taken away all their belongings, so how could this fellow recognize it with a single glance? You dare not appreciate it. The orc boss smashed the cup and took out 2 short axes from his back. He fiercely said, I'll let you know the result of rejecting the orc's good intentions. Since the soft approach didn't work, they were going to use the hard approach? Dongfang Haoren kicked out and the orc boss was sent flying out the door. This strong? The orc boss quickly stood up, but before he could say anything, an arrow pierced through the stone wall, piercing through the orc boss' chest. Damn! Where did this arrow come from? The Beastman boss had died without knowing why. More and more arrows pierced through the walls, wildly shooting at the people in the hotel. The person shooting the arrows outside clearly wanted to kill everyone in the hotel. Chu Tian's group felt this was strange. Who the fuck was shooting arrows outside? Could this place be any more chaotic? I'll do it! Vivian suddenly cut open the space and led everyone out of the hotel. Chapter 365. Dozens of fierce bandits from different races surrounded the small inn in circles. Every single one of them held a bow in their hands and shot arrows at the inn. They were clearly not ordinary people. Every arrow contained powerful spirit energy, and that sharp power could easily pierce through a small stone house. The orc boss had been killed by the arrows. This is the result of offending us. The leader of the Snake Clan summoned several large fireballs and smashed them. The small inn that was riddled with holes finally exploded and collapsed. The intense flames burned the inn to ashes and under the heat, the corpses were burnt to ashes. Stop! The Snake Clan leader waved his hand. They should be dead. Dig out the corpses and let everyone have a look. I want to see who dares to kill my Siku's subordinates. Yes. Several bandits rushed into the ruins to extinguish the fire and immediately began to search for the corpses. Boss, there's no one here? What did you say? The Snake Man Siku had a stunned expression. This was impossible, they were clearly inside. Could they have evaporated into thin air? At this moment, a voice came from behind him. Hey, are you looking for us? Siku turned around and 5 people appeared behind him. They were less than 10 meters away, and it seemed like they had been standing here for a long time, but Siku did not notice them at all. 4 humans and 1 elf. Weren't these the fellows that had offended him? Now they were completely unharmed and had mysteriously appeared behind him. Meng Yingying saw their appearance and said in a disgusted voice, "What kind of race are these? Why are they all so ugly?" The Snake Clan was not a spirit beast, rather they were an independent race. They had a snake's lower body and a human's upper body, but their skin was covered in scales. Their eyes were cold and gloomy, their voices were low and hoarse, and their tongues were forked, making them look very ugly. These fellows should be with the lizard men from before. This mob did not belong to any race, and was clearly a group of bandits that ruled this place. Damn, you dare play tricks on me? Chu Tian revealed a face of ridicule. Play tricks on you? Are you worthy? Scott's forked tongue retracted, his long and narrow snake eyes filled with anger. Do you know who I am? Damn it, it's none of my business who you are. Chu Tian waved his hand impatiently. So noisy, who can make him shut up? Chen Bingyu and Dongfang Haoren stood up. Siku pulled out a trident. You dare to challenge Lord Siku? You overestimate yourselves, die. Siku's 3-meter-long tail jumped up and he shot out from the ground, charging forward like a meteor. A dark green viper source spirit appeared and the surroundings were filled with a green poison fog. A poison attributed source spirit? This kind of attribute was indeed a little difficult to deal with. However, this snake man's cultivation was only in the 7th awakened soul layer. Although he had reached the true soul realm, if he was placed in the 3 great clans, he would be considered a senior elder. He could be considered a first-class expert in the southern Xia, but meeting Chu Tian's group, he could only be considered unlucky. In the end, Chen Bingyu directly grabbed the trident. Siku revealed a sinister cold smile, seeking death. The trident released a large amount of dark green poison that instantly exploded onto Chen Bingyu's divine sense. This poison was very corrosive and could easily corrode a true soul realm cultivator's protective spirit energy. This girl dared to block this attack with her bare hands. She was no different from a dead person. Who would have thought that Chen Bingyu would not react at all? This strong corrosive poison could not corrode the Starlight immortal body and could not harm Chen Bingyu at all. Instead, an extremely cold energy was released from Chen Bingyu's body. All of the poison was frozen and sealed. The ice spread along the trident to the snake race's entire body. The snake man saw that the situation was bad and immediately retreated. A pitiful cry rang out. Siku retreated, but with a kacha sound, both his arms were broken. His frozen arms fell to the ground along with the trident. This fellow's hands were completely crippled. Everyone was stunned. Siku was not weak, but he was easily defeated. This human girl did not even use her full strength. This meant that this human's strength far surpassed everyone's imagination. If you dare kill me, you'll definitely regret it. Siku retreated in fear. Dongfang Haoren's source spirit turned into a giant flaming sword. He stepped off the ground and soared into the sky, instantly appearing in front of Siku. Wait a minute. I am the great Spider Count Cannon's subordinate. He did not even finish speaking. Dongfang Haoren passed by his body. That terrifying sword glow did not cut his body in half. Rather it cut a large piece of flesh and blood, leaving a deep mark on the ground. The boss is dead. Everyone, quickly run. These wild bandits usually bullied the people of this small village. When had they ever met such a powerful person? They were so scared that they pissed their pants. Chen Bingyu and Dongfang Haoren charged forward. There was a series of pitiful cries and begging for mercy, but in just a short few seconds, everything returned to normal. If they weren't ice shards, they had already been chopped into meat paste. In short, there was not a single person left standing. Siku is dead. Siku is dead. These bandits were clearly the tyrants of this small town. When the snakeman and his subordinates were killed, the other people in the small town all revealed looks of shock. Everyone calm down, everyone calm down. Chu Tian felt good about himself and immediately raised his hands and said, "Everyone doesn't need to thank me or worship me. Eliminating evil for the people, punishing evil for the good, this is what I should do." Vivian said in a doubtful voice, "Big brother Chu Tian, they don't seem to be thanking us. How could that be?" Chu Tian was a bit stunned. When he looked over everyone, not only did they not shed tears of gratitude, they all revealed looks of fear. Siku has been killed. This small town is finished, this small town is finished. Damn, where did these people come from? We built this small town with great difficulty, and it was destroyed by them. Quickly leave. Canon's anger is not something we can endure. These people did not have any joy, rather they felt like a disaster was about to befall them. They looked at Chu Tian's group with eyes that did not have the slightest bit of gratitude, rather they were filled with anger and hatred. If it wasn't for the fact that they were strong, they would have already tied them up and offered them to Canon for forgiveness. What is going on? Meng Yingying scratched her head. Could it be that killing a few bad people is something wrong? What kind of logic is this? When she saw eyes filled with anger, fear, and blame, Meng Yingying felt like her three views had been turned upside down. When did killing bad people become doing bad things? Chu Tian knit his brows. These fellows did not have a normal background. The powers in the Forest of Chaos were all vassals, so these fellows could be controlled by a certain power. They could act like tyrants in this small town, and the fact that the small town was not destroyed, it was all because of this power's protection. This can't be blamed on them. Chu Tian patted Meng Yingying's shoulder. It is not easy for these low-level powers to have a small town. Many villages rely on this small town to survive. Now that the small town can't be protected, of course they hate us. Then what do? We didn't do anything wrong. Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders. Could it be that we have to swallow this humiliation after being bullied to this point? That's not my style. Don't think about it too much. There are many things in this world that can't be said right or wrong. Let's go to these fellows' nest first and see if there are any clues. It would be best if we can investigate the origins of that reptile count. I don't want to cause trouble for no reason. Who was the Spider Count Canon? Vivian had never heard of him before, so he shouldn't be any large character. Siku and the others were human traffickers in the Forest of Chaos before, but they met the Spider Count and were recruited as his underlings. They were the Spider Count's agents in the small town, collecting protection fees and transaction fees. Of course, most of this money had to be handed over. In a place like the Forest of Chaos, it was impossible to survive without a strong enough umbrella. The Spider Count Canon's reputation was not small, and it was his reputation that prevented the small town from being destroyed by outsiders. As Sika's agent, naturally no one dared to provoke him, so he could do whatever he wanted in the small town. Not only did he ruthlessly oppress the villagers, he also promoted the business of other human traffickers. This poor ghost doesn't have any property at all. Chu Tian searched Sika's place. There was a dungeon that had over 100 people locked up, and they were all Sika's goods. Chu Tian only found 200 low-grade source stones. This was not a small amount to normal people, but it couldn't enter Chu Tian's eyes. Open the dungeon and let everyone go. Chu Tian was not interested in human trafficking, so he opened the dungeon and let everyone go. However, at this time, there was a very special slave that caught Chu Tian's attention. This was a man that was only 3 meters tall, not even as tall as Vivian. However, his muscles were very well developed and his face was covered in a red beard. His age was equivalent to a 20-30-year-old human. Dwarves? Why were there dwarves here? The dwarves were famous for their refining skills. Each dwarf had an outstanding talent in refining, so the price of dwarven slaves was not low. The most important thing was that dwarves usually lived in mines. As long as he found a dwarf, wouldn't he be able to find the high-level ores Chu Tian needed? Chu Tian quickly made him stay. Dongfang Haoran held the dwarf in one hand as he walked over and threw him in front of Chu Tian. The dwarf said a bunch of things. His 2 little eyes were wide open like he was filled with rage. Meng Yingying did not understand the dwarf language. What is he saying? Vivian explained, the dwarves think we are bad people. They think we are human traffickers. Chu Tian explained in the dwarf language before asking about the ores. After all, buying ores was the most important thing in this trip to the Forest of Chaos. It was impossible for the dwarves not to know about ores. They relied on this to make a living. The dwarf looked at Chu Tian in doubt and asked in a heavily accented human language, "You really aren't Canon's minions? So you can speak the human language?" Meng Yingying rolled her eyes. "We don't even know who Canon is. You just need to tell us if you have ores to buy or not. We really need them." The dwarf revealed a dejected expression. The dwarves have a lot of ores in their mines, only what? The dwarf revealed an angry expression. "Our mines have already been taken away." Taken away? Who did it? Spider Count Cannon. All right, Chu Tian patted his forehead. This time he couldn't avoid it. But speaking of this, who was this fellow? Chapter 366. The dwarves were naturally on guard against humans. This was the same reason as the elves being on guard against humans. Humans were one of the most complicated races on the continent. Saying they were noble, of course they were not, but saying they were evil was not completely true. However, the human traffickers and hunters in the Forest of Chaos were mostly working for the humans. The humans were gradually becoming the wealthiest and most technologically advanced group on the continent. Although the human race's overall strength was weaker than the spirit beasts and elves, their future potential could already be seen. The dwarves already had nothing. Being on guard was being on guard, but there was nothing to lie about, so he said everything he could. This dwarf's full name was Tino Oldman, living in the Oldman Mines 200 kilometers away. The Oldman Mines had around 50,000 dwarves at its peak. After over 100 years of development, they had built a large underground palace. The dwarves' nature was somewhat similar to that of the dragon race. They had a very strong hobby of collecting precious things. However, compared to the dragon race, who were greedy for everything, the dwarves only liked mineral resources, such as precious metals, rare crystal ores, and divine weapons. Therefore, an old mine that had been operating for 100 years was no different from a treasure. This was also the source of all disasters. The dwarves followed the dark forest law, trying their best to hide themselves. However, they were different from the other races. Once the other races were exposed, they would immediately move away, but the dwarves could not give up on their mines. The Oldman mines were finally exposed, attracting countless greedy people. But the dwarves were a race of warriors. They were well equipped with powerful weapons and were very powerful in battle. Adding in the defense system they had built over 100 years, it was hard for enemies to break in. In the last 10 years, they had been attacked every now and then, but the dwarves won every time. Only after a long period of fighting, the dwarves' population had shrunk to around half of their peak population. While the dwarves were feeling tired, a powerful opponent had appeared. This guy was Cannon, nicknamed the Spider Count. Cannon had hired large amounts of bandits to attack from the outside, and he had the Spider Army dig tunnels to launch a sneak attack from the inside. After a fierce battle, the dwarves were either dead or captured alive. The entire Oldman mines had fallen, and even those that managed to escape were powerless to reverse the situation. The dwarves' 100 years of wealth had been taken by cannon, and over 1,000 dwarves had been sold as slaves to human countries. The entire Oldman dwarf clan was finished. Tino drank cup after cup of wine, his face filled with anger and resentment. Vivian was indignant. "He's just a nobody that I've never heard of. How can he be so arrogant? Don't worry, dwarf brother. We'll help you get the mine back." Meng Yingying scratched her head, a bit confused. "I know about spirit beasts and elves, but what are spirit insects?" From the spider count, nickname and the dwarf's description, this fellow was without a doubt a spirit insect. The Forest of Chaos did not just have a few strong powers on the surface, there were many powers that were hidden and unknown to people. The spirit insects were like this. As for how strong they were, the elves all had their own opinions and there was no conclusion for a long time. The spirit insects were very special, living in the underground world. Most of the underground cities were ruled by various spirit insects, therefore in terms of influence, the spirit insects were not inferior to the elves or spirit beasts. But because the spirit insects did not like living on the surface, they rarely clashed with the elves or spirit beasts, so it was hard to estimate the other side's strength. There were some elven elders who had expressed their opinions that the spirit insects hidden underground in the Forest of Chaos were much stronger than imagined. They were one of the most mysterious powers in the Forest of Chaos, so the elves had to take precautions. But there were some elven elders who thought that the spirit insects were similar to the spirit beasts, having many different races. There were many different spirit insects that would fight with each other and the intensity would not be inferior to the battles on the surface. Although there were a lot of them, it was nothing to worry about. No matter who was right, it was an indisputable fact that there were a large number of spirit insects in the Forest of Chaos. From Tino's description, the spider count cannon was very strong. Not to mention that cannon had at least 20–30,000 people under him, and they were all not weak troops. No matter how strong Chu Tian's group was, if they met a battle where the numbers were not equal, they would be exhausted to death. Once their spirit energy was exhausted, it was useless no matter how high their cultivation was. "We don't have enough people. How many dwarven warriors are left?" Although the dwarves were not smart, they still had to be careful when it came to the whereabouts of their companions. Who knew if this fellow in front of them was Cannon's plan to eliminate the dwarves? "If you don't even have basic trust, how can we help you?" "Human, how can I trust you?" Tino coldly said. "Would you be this kind to help the dwarves fight?" "Dwarves, look." Vivian stood up and released her powerful spirit energy. A dagger filled with the aura of spatial energy appeared. "If you still think that I am Cannon's subordinate, then I have nothing to say." Spirit energy strength. True spirit realm. It was a spatial attributed source spirit. True spirit realm experts were very rare, not to mention a true spirit realm expert with an innate spatial attribute. Even if Cannon had skills as high as the sky, he could not find this kind of person to work for him. Not to mention that Vivian was an elf and the elves were a race that could be trusted. The dwarves have 5,000 warriors retreat to the new mines to prepare for battle. Tino did not hesitate as he immediately stood up and said, "As long as you help the dwarves take back the Oldman mines, the dwarves will agree to whatever you want." 5,000 people? This number was a bit small, but it was enough. This place was very far from southern Xia, so it was not convenient for Chu Tian to bring the army over, so he could only make do with what he had. The dwarves were brave warriors, so 5,000 people was not a weak battle force. The dwarves' gathering place was a new mine that had been developed for less than 2 years. On the surface, it looked like a cave. There were a few long rails inside, and huge black iron carts were placed on the rails. The smelting room had just been built, so it looked very simple. The 5,000 dwarves were hiding here, planning to take back the oldman mines that belonged to the dwarf. Although they knew that fighting with the strength of 5,000 people was no different from sending themselves to death, the dwarves were a stubborn race, so they would give it a try no matter what. Tino brought back reinforcements at this time, and the other dwarves were very surprised. An old dwarf chief was questioning the strength of these people. After all, whether it was the humans or elves, they all looked very young. Chu Tian felt that if he wanted to negotiate with these fellows, he had to show his strength first. "Ying, come out," Chu Tian directly said to the dwarf chief. "This is the one with the lowest cultivation among us. If the old chief can harm a single hair on her head, we will help the dwarves for free." "Arrogant human," the old chief disdainfully said. "I am in the 8th awakened soul layer, and the dwarves have a strong cultivation technique. Even a 9th awakened soul layer cultivator would not dare say they would be unharmed, so why are you this confident?" "This is only a bet," Chu Tian softly said. "If you can't harm her after we defeat Cannon, I want half of the wealth in the dwarves' mines." "Half?" Every dwarf was fuming with rage and anger. This fellow was too greedy. He actually opened his mouth and asked for half. The reserves in the Oldman mines were the dwarves' collection for 100 years. Cannon had only occupied the Oldman mines for half a year, and most of the things had not been transported yet. This half was a shocking number. This fellow was simply asking for too much. "This is very fair." Chu Tian did not feel that his price was too high. "Without the help of the 5 of us, not to mention half of your 5,000 people, you would only be sending yourselves to death." The dwarves were famous for their stubborn tempers. How could they tolerate this kind of arrogance? A dwarf shouted, "You want to take half with just the 5 of you, don't you think you're too greedy? It's not quantity, it's quality. The benefits and risks are equal." Chu Tian did not back down at all. "No one knows if Cannon has a stronger power behind him, so helping the dwarves this time is also a risk for us." "All right, I'll bet with you." The dwarf pulled out a battle hammer. This hammer was completely black and was flowing with the glow of lava, releasing a strong aura. It was clearly a soul-contracting weapon. "I want to see if you can block my hammer." The might of a soul-contracting weapon was shocking. The old dwarf chief had a deep cultivation base of the 8th awakened soul layer. The most important thing was that the dwarf's cultivation technique was wild, overbearing, and strong. Even if a 9th awakened soul layer cultivator was hit by this hammer, if they didn't die, they would still be heavily injured. Meng Ying gave a snort and her body was covered in starlight. "Come at me. If I dodge even a little, it'll be your win." The old patriarch let out a low roar, and the floor under his feet cracked from the oppressive force. The huge hammer erupted with intense flames, and the air in the entire mine was boiling hot. When the hammer was swung up, the surrounding space crackled, as if a fire dragon was dancing in his hand. Meng Ying's brows jumped up. The dwarf's strength was truly overbearing. She immediately put away her contempt and released her source spirit, which was a beautiful mirror. There was a glow coming from the mirror that covered Meng Ying's body. Ying's mirror source spirit had 2 abilities. The first ability was mirror imitation. As long as she was strong enough, Ying could copy any cultivation technique or source spirit. Although it was only temporary, it gave her various abilities. The second ability was mirror reflection, which was a defensive ability. When Ying was attacked, this source spirit's power would reflect a portion of the attack back. When the starlight immortal body and the mirror source spirit were used at the same time, Ying's defensive power increased by several times. The dwarf chief's wild hammer slammed down on Ying's body. With a giant explosion sound, the surrounding ground was shattered by the force. Meng Ying only used her arms to block it, but she wasn't injured at all. "What?" Just as the dwarf chief's face turned pale with fright, a mountain-toppling power bounced back at him like a mountain. The dwarf chief coughed up a mouthful of blood and was sent flying into the wall, creating a large hole in it. "Chief!" The other dwarves were shocked. Meng Yingying had a proud look on her face. Although the starlight protecting her body was cracking, it was not broken. This old fellow was truly strong. Meng Yingying used all her strength to activate the mirror source spirit, consuming half of her spirit energy and sending him flying. The dwarves did not look down on these 5 people at all. If the weakest person had this kind of strength, then how strong was the strongest? This team of 5 people had the ability to turn defeat into victory for the dwarves. The dwarf chief was supported by his clansmen as he walked out. The dwarves agree to your request. As long as you can kill Cannon and take back the mine for the dwarves, half of the wealth will belong to you. Chapter 367. 5,000 dwarves were neatly standing in the hall. When Chu Tian looked down from a high place, he couldn't even tell if they were male or female, old or young. This was because the dwarves were all tall and had the same appearance. They had rich hair and their faces were covered in beards, which was the symbol of the dwarves. Even if they were male or female, they were the same. Other than that, they were less than 1.40 meters tall, but they grew horizontally, forming a triangle of muscles. Kill Cannon! Kill Cannon! Take back the Oldman mines! Take back the Oldman mines! The dwarves had already put on their armor and raised their weapons as they shouted a few words. Following this, all the wine and meat in the warehouse were brought out, letting the dwarves eat and drink to their heart's content. They were prepared to cut off their means of retreat and fight to the death. The dwarves were not a race that was easy to get along with. Not only did they have a fiery temper, they were also very stubborn. Once the dwarves decided on something, even the Heavenly Emperor would find it hard to change it. So once the dwarves bore a grudge, it would be a lifelong grudge. Actually, anyone with a bit of a brain could understand that the Oldman mines could not stay any longer. Even if the dwarves took back the mines, they would not have the power to defend it. This 100-year-old mine was destined not to belong to the dwarf. How could these several thousand people defend their homeland? Would the dwarves leave? Impossible. Chu Tian understood these stubborn fellows. They knew that they would die if they stayed in the mines, so they were not willing to give the mines to others. However, this was an opportunity for Chu Tian. Chu Tian was very interested in the Oldman mines and the dwarf. This was because the dwarves that could survive were all elites of their tribes. Not to mention their battle strength, they were all experienced refining experts. Chu Tian was strictly a merchant and the benefits these dwarves could create were very large. Miracle commerce was still lacking in refining materials and production. If he could take this chance to swallow Oldman's small town, wouldn't that make up for Miracle Commerce's shortcomings? Not bad, not bad. Swindling others, I'm the best at it. Vivian was eating her fruit when she noticed Chu Tian snickering. What are you laughing at, brother Chu Tian? He probably came up with an idea to harm people again. Meng Yingying acted as if she knew Chu Tian the best. Vivian was shocked. Brother Chu Tian is a good person. Why would he harm people? These words almost made Chen Bingyu choke. Were the fairies selectively blind? Chu Tian had destroyed the barbarians' homeland without leaving any leeway. But now, the barbarians were singing his praises and shedding tears of gratitude. In the future, they would have to risk their lives to fight for him. Speaking of which, these barbarians had been cheated badly. Dong dong dong. The dwarves beat their war drums. The clan leader personally put on his armor and led his clansmen out. Chu Tian came over and said to the 4 of them, "We should also go." The Oldman mine was at the end of a canyon. This canyon was very inconspicuous in the forest, and if a flying demon beast swooped down from the sky, it would be a very common terrain in the forest. There was nothing special about it at all. Who would have thought that there would be several energy veins underground that would even attract a group of dwarves? There were several canyons in this area and each canyon had many branches. Although the terrain was very common, the structure was very complex. The main entrance of the Oldman mine was just a very common mountain wall. When Chu Tian looked into the distance, He saw that the entire mountain wall was covered in vines and moss. There was even a small waterfall hanging down, but no matter how carefully he looked, he couldn't see a single trace of it. It was just like a very common place. This is the Oldman mine. This wall has a mechanism designed by the dwarves. As the dwarf chief spoke, he took out a stone key that was more than a foot long. The key's structure was very complicated, and it was inlaid with several crystals of different properties. We just need to insert the key into it, and the stone wall will automatically open. Dwarven brothers, let us kill our way in and take back our property and the mine. The dwarves wanted to charge in against a common enemy. Wait a minute. Chu Tian stopped the reckless dwarves. Cannon has several times more people than you. There is no chance of winning if you charge in. We have to fight even if we can't win. Dwarven brothers are not afraid of strong enemies. That's right, Dwarven brothers are not afraid of strong enemies. We have to kill Cannon even if we have to risk our lives. Don't be excited. Chu Tian said to the dwarves, since we are not in a rush, we should wait a bit and let us sneak in and assassinate Cannon. This way, the spider army will be in chaos and won't you have a better chance? Assassinate Cannon? The dwarf chief's face slightly changed. You can do it? Other than here, there is no other place we can go. Would I say something I couldn't do? Chu Tian first asked for a detailed map of the Oldman mine. When he looked over the environment of the Oldman mine, he couldn't help being amazed. The scale of this mine was very large. The dwarves had turned this place into a large underground palace. The Oldman mine's design was very reasonable. The entire underground palace was divided into upper, middle, and lower levels. The excavation area and the refining area were at the bottom level, with 6 large dwarven mines and several dozen craftsmen's houses. The living area and storage area were in the middle level, with over 20,000 rooms and 15 streets. The top level was the breeding, cultivation, and activity area. There were over 800 houses here, as well as a special area for growing crops. The entire mine was in the shape of an inverted trapezoid. The higher the level, the larger the space. It could hold over 100,000 people at the same time. If they could solve the problem of food and living resources, even if 200,000–300,000 people lived here, it would still be possible. How was this a mine? This was simply a small underground city. I want you to bring us in. Chu Tian gave the map to Vivian. Can you see if you can do it? Of course, there's no problem. Vivian raised her chest and confidently agreed, but she had a worry. Only I don't know the situation in the mine, and I don't know where Cannon will appear. If we teleport in and appear in the middle of a large group of enemies, wouldn't that be walking right into a trap? GG. The little fox stretched out its head. It was unknown when a large jade ball had appeared in its hand. This was not a normal jade ball, there was a pupil on it that released an indescribable might. Stop showing off. Chu Tian directly slapped the little fox's butt. Get to work. The little fox gestured a few times with its claws. You little fellow, you're actually bargaining with me again. It's been too long since I've beaten you. Are you itching for a beating? Chu Tian understood the little fox's style very well. This fellow would not do anything without benefits, so he could only agree. All right, I'll give you a portion of the benefits when the time comes. Vivian did not understand Chu Tian's pet too well, she only knew that this fellow had a bit of skill. Moreover, it was very understanding and its intelligence was higher than a normal human's. The little fox obtained a satisfied answer and began to release its divine sense while holding the divine eye. After a few seconds, the little fox opened its eyes and those sparkling eyes released a glow. It immediately jumped onto Vivian's hand and used its claws to point out a location on the map. No problem. Vivian used her spatial energy to lock onto the location and brought everyone over one by one. Bringing people to teleport used up a lot of energy, and if there were too many people, even she wouldn't be able to handle it. 4 people used up a third of her spirit energy, so she didn't dare bring more people in. The last one to enter was Meng Yingying. Meng Yingying felt the scenery change, and she suddenly appeared in a completely unfamiliar environment. All sides were sealed off and there was not a single light, but it was not dark at all. Rather it was very bright. Meng Yingying gently took a step forward. Hua la la la. This was the sound of a bunch of silver jades colliding, sounding very clear. Looking over, Meng Yingying was stunned. Because her 2 feet were stepping on a large silver river, she had accidentally kicked it and a large amount of metal was scattered. It shined with light just like flowing water. Meng Yingying picked up a silver ingot that was silvery white and covered in a faint glow. This was clearly a kind of mithril energy metal. The entire ground was covered in this kind of metal. When she looked around, she was shocked to find that this magnificent silver river was just a small stream. There were mountains of materials all around them, with the majority of them being metal materials and most of them being level 3 and above high-level materials. This is too much. Meng Yingying excitedly said to Chu Tian, "This is what miracle commerce lacks. We'll split these materials and we can immediately make weapons." There were so many high-level metal materials here. How many storm rifles and source energy cannons could they turn into? Miracle Commerce's technology and technology would all be developed by leaps and bounds. "Come back here for me." Chu Tian grabbed the little fox's tail and pulled it out from the mountain of treasures. "You little fellow, I finally understand why you chose this place." The little fox's mouth was filled with metal essence, and it swallowed it all into its stomach, turning into a gray fog. Chu Tian felt his hands become empty as the little fox jumped several meters away. With a speed visible to the naked eye, a small mountain was swallowed into the little fox's stomach. "Little fox, why are you so disobedient?" Meng Yingying was a bit puzzled. "This is all metal, can you digest it after swallowing it?" The little fox looked at Meng Yingying with a look of disdain. "You can even ask such a stupid question? This fox does not need this scrap metal, but Master needs it. This fox will first store a portion in my stomach and wait for a good price. When the time comes, I can fiercely rip off Master. This bastard would tear the roof tiles if he wasn't beaten for 3 days. This damn fox was asking for a beating. It had to be properly taught a lesson. How could this little fox be caught that easily?" Chu Tian was brought everywhere by it, but he couldn't catch it at all. The treasure room's door suddenly opened. "What is going on? Why is there a sound coming from inside?" Several strange intelligent races walked into the treasure room. They looked like a mix of humans and spiders. Their upper bodies were similar to humans, but their lower bodies had 8 spider legs. They walked very quickly and each leg was like a steel blade. Spider race, a kind of spirit insect. Chapter 368. The spider people were half human and half spider, but one shouldn't think that their upper bodies were exactly the same as humans. In fact, even if the spider people ignored their lower bodies and compared their human-like upper bodies, they were still 2 completely different races from humans. First, they didn't have mouths and only had mouth parts similar to arthropods. 2 poisonous pincers came out of their mouths, making them look very fierce. The spider people also had insect compound eyes, with a total of 4. Their hair was ash-gray and was rather sparse. Just describing it to this point, it could be imagined just how ugly they were. Of course, ugly was relative. After all, judging beauty with a human sense of beauty was a very narrow matter. In the eyes of the spirit insects, how could humans not be ugly? The spider people had 8 spider legs. 6 of them were very slender, like steel blades. The 2 in front were very thick, able to easily dig through the ground. Actually, the spider race was a very common race among the spirit insects. They were sly, sharp, and cruel. They were proficient in setting traps and using poisons, so most of them were experienced hunters. A strange sound from the storage room attracted the attention of the guards. Several spider people opened the door to patrol, and their steel blade-like legs made a clear sound as they stepped on the metal on the ground. Actually, the spider people's legs were very special. Not only could they dig through the ground, they could also absorb spirit energy, allowing them to stand on walls and even walk on the ceiling. No matter what kind of terrain it was, it could not stop the spider people. Other than that, the spider people's legs were covered in fine hairs. These hairs were not decorations, they were covered in the spider people's unique spirit energy. This spirit energy could be transmitted several meters away, and even the slightest vibration could not escape the sharp senses of the spider people. Several spider people looked around and didn't find anything strange. Could it be they were thinking too much? When the spider people were filled with doubts, their sensitive bodies suddenly felt a very slight vibration, as if there was a sound coming from under their feet. When the several spider people lowered their heads, the metal ingots under their feet were frozen by the blue and white frost. By the time they felt that something was wrong, it was already too late. The cold current quickly gushed out, and the several spider people didn't even have time to react before they were instantly frozen into ice sculptures. Chu Tian used his sword to hit each ice sculpture, and they instantly shattered into pieces. Hurry up! The little fox was a bit unwilling to take out the eyeball. Its divine sense spread out with the divine vision, and everything in the Oldman mine, even the most inconspicuous detail, could not escape its sight. On the second floor of the luxurious palace, there was a particularly burly and majestic Arachne sleeping amidst a large number of the dwarf's precious collections. Only half of his body was exposed. This spider person was not the same as the others. Although his body structure was also half spider and half human, his body was almost twice the size of a normal spider person. The skin on his upper body was greenish-black, and the surface of his body was covered with strange totems and incantations. He was wearing a gorgeous armor and a purely decorative cloak. A thick, 3-meter-long spear lay horizontally beside him. That's right. It must be the spider Count Cannon. Cannon was sleeping soundly, but the pillars around the palace were covered in dense spider webs. When the little fox's divine sense entered the palace, almost all the spider webs began to tremble. These vibrations followed the pillars and the ground, finally being captured by the sensor on Cannon's leg. Who? Cannon stood up from the countless treasures, and his ugly spirit insect face was filled with vigilance. Divine sense? Someone is using their divine sense to investigate this place. There's a mouse that has snuck in. When he heard the leader's voice, instantly several hundred elite spider race warriors charged in. Search! Cannon angrily roared. It should be nearby. Have everyone gather here, we must find the mouse for me. Almost in an instant, several thousand spider race people began to move. They used their high senses and speed to quickly search around the hall for the intruder. The little fox put away the eyeball and quickly gestured at Chu Tian a few times. Vivian asked, "Have you found it?" "We've found it, but it's a bit bad. We've already been discovered." "What? How did they find us?" Chu Tian never thought that the spider race would have this kind of special ability. Not only could their spider webs sense normal vibrations and energy changes, they could even sense divine sense scanning. This was very rare. Cannon has gathered his army. It's impossible for us to sneak attack. The entire mine is filled with spider race people searching, and once we're discovered, we won't be able to complete our mission. Everyone's faces slightly sunk. Although the 5 of them were very strong, they couldn't resist the attacks of tens of thousands of people. Not to mention that from the dwarf's description, Cannon himself was a true spirit realm expert. They thought that with Vivian's spatial abilities, this assassination would be very easy, but who would have thought that this kind of accident would occur? It seemed like they had underestimated these insects. Meng Yingying nervously asked, "What do we do? This matter is a bit troublesome, but there's no need to worry." Chu Tian maintained his calm. There was nothing to be afraid of, the little fox can use its divine eye to release its divine sense, so it can jump to any spatial location. This is different from radiating divine sense from a person's divine sense. Canon's search will be fruitless, so his people will spread to other areas. When the number of troops decreases, we'll make our move at that time. All right. It was just like what Chu Tian had guessed. Canon thought that the intruder was nearby or even in the palace, so he gathered several thousand people to search every corner, not letting go of a single corner. The spider people had a strong perception, and with this many people searching, even if the other side had a powerful cultivation technique, they would not be able to hide. However, no matter how the spider people searched, they could not find the other side. This made Canon a bit uneasy. Could it be that the other side had already escaped when they were discovered? This place was heavily guarded both inside and outside. If they could escape from this kind of defense, they would not be ordinary people. Humph, sly mice. Canon was a bit restless. Search, we have to find them even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground. I don't believe that they can disappear into thin air. Canon ordered the spider army to scatter and search, but he placed spider webs around the entrance and exit of the palace. This would prevent the other side from sneaking back and attacking. No matter how skilled they were in stealth, they couldn't just pass through walls, right? Even if they passed through walls, the slightest change in energy would be detected by the spider's silk. Not to mention that Canon was very cautious. On one hand he sent people to search, on the other hand he left 200 elites by his side. This was enough to deal with any sudden situations. Canon could not understand, why would someone run in here? Just as he was feeling perplexed, the surrounding spider's silk trembled again. This time, it was no longer a divine sense scan, but a kind of violent energy disturbance. An incomparably sharp force directly repelled the other forces in the space, forcibly tearing the space apart. This is bad. Spatial energy. Canon was shocked. Be careful, there's an assassin. Vivian tore open a spatial passage, and a few people charged out. More than 100 spider bodyguards surrounded Canon. Vivian raised her sword and sent out a spatial slash, slicing more than a dozen bodyguards in half at the waist. This kind of spatial attack could not be defended against at all. Because a slash formed from a spatial distortion, it was an attack on the spatial level. No matter how dense or strong a material was, it could not resist this kind of tearing. Canon quickly released his spirit energy, attempting to use his energy to disturb the surrounding space and reduce the success rate of the spatial attack. He loudly shouted, "Kill them!" The spider guards charged forward with their weapons in hand. Chen Bingyu and Dongfang Haoran charged out from the left and right, instantly sending several dozen spider guards flying. Canon felt that something was wrong. These people were very strong and the guards could not stop them, so he had to call for more troop. He released some energy into the spider's silk, and the energy was immediately sent to all parts of the spider's silk. Almost every Spider Clan member received this urgent message and immediately rushed towards the main hall. There was the sound of the spider army charging in all directions. In at most a few seconds this place would be surrounded. Meng Yingying quickly shouted, "Vivian, quickly kill him!" Vivian sent out a spatial slash and Canon's energy had already filled the surroundings. Although his cultivation couldn't stop the spatial attack from forming, he could still slow down the speed of the spatial slash. Canon pulled back in time and dodged the attack, but one of his legs was still cut off. "Consider yourself lucky." Vivian gave a snort and began to condense more spirit energy. Canon was a true spirit expert, but he was only in the first true spirit layer. This elf with spatial energy was at least in the third true spirit layer, so she was definitely not his match. She had to quickly run. Pooh! Canon spat out a large cloud of poison mist, and was about to run away. Flame Demon Transformation. Chu Tian turned into a flame demon and entered his second state. Like a sharp meteor, he chased after Canon and slashed out with a flaming sword. Seeking death. Canon could feel Chu Tian's aura. This person's cultivation was around the 8th awakened soul layer. Even if he used a strange secret technique and was not weaker than a peak 9th awakened soul layer expert, trying to block a true spirit cultivator was still overestimating himself. He casually sent out a spear. Who would have thought that when Chu Tian sent out a full-strength slash, he would release the demon god's sword source spirit? This source spirit that was close to the god level immediately increased the might of the sword glow by several times. Dang! A crack appeared on Chu Tian's starlight barrier and he was sent flying several meters. Canon only took a step back, but he revealed a look of disbelief. Although it was true that Canon had the upper hand, with his trivial awakened soul realm strength, forcing back a true spirit cultivator, this was an impossible matter. After Chu Tian's cultivation increased, this was the first time he had made a move, so he was satisfied. Canon's cultivation was only a bit weaker than Malam's. Being able to fight with this kind of opponent without being injured, this was enough to make Chu Tian in the 8th awakened soul layer feel proud. This did not mean that Chu Tian had a chance of winning. Actually, without using the power of his main source spirit, Chu Tian would not be able to last more than 10 rounds. But this was not important. Chu Tian did not need to personally fight with him, it was enough as long as he stopped Canon. Vivian's explosive power turned into a dozen spatial slashes that descended at the same time. No! Canon gave a pitiful cry as he was cut into several pieces. Any protective spirit energy or defensive cultivation technique was useless as he was cut into pieces like tofu. Chapter 369. Canon was a peak expert that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the refined ruler and the burning sun ruler, but in a place like the Forest of Chaos, he could only be considered a third-rate expert. The Warhound's Kingdom's Fong King with his third true spirit layer cultivation was not Vivian's match, so there was no suspense in this battle at all. Chu Tian could have just sent Vivian out because of the void escaping as special property. As long as the attack did not surpass a certain threshold, no matter how many attacks there were, it would be useless against Vivian. Therefore, as long as the little fox found Canon's position, Vivian would have a chance to kill him by herself. This was not a very hard or dangerous task. Of course, in order to prevent Canon from using special methods to escape, the dwarves would think that Chu Tian had risked his life to help them. In order to kill more enemies and create more chaos, Chu Tian still brought others with him. After all, there was a large difference between lifting a finger and risking one's life in the eyes of the dwarf. Vivian's spatial attacks consumed a lot of energy, so she was not good at group fights. She could only attack important targets, and if they were comparing the number of enemies she could kill, she could not even compare to Chunbingyu. The Count is dead. The Count is dead. When Sword Daoist Canon was cut to pieces, the entire spider army fell into chaos. The spider race's ability to send information through spider silk was very useful, but it could also cause trouble at times. For example, when panic broke out, it could add fuel to the fire. The spider army was at least in the 9th body refinement layer, and the overall battle strength of the army was even stronger than the southern Xia Storm cavalry. The mines were filled with traps left by the spider race and the fortifications left by the dwarves. If this army could calm down and rely on their current advantage, they might not be able to defend themselves. But in a world where there was a large disparity in strength, the strongest person was not just the leader of the army. In a sense, they were the spiritual pillars, and the death of a leader was a destructive blow to morale. Kill, disturb their troops. Chu Tian did not need to give any orders. Chen Bingyu and Dongfang Haoran charged out like two meteors. Two peak 9th awakened soul layer experts, they were both naturally talented people with strong defenses. Unless they met a true spirit realm expert, it would be hard for them to be defeated before they ran out of spirit energy. The spirit insects were not as brave as the spirit beasts, so they killed over 400-500 of them. After consuming over half of their spirit energy and weakening their attacks, the spider army's generals adjusted the situation and began to resist and surround them. However, a decent resistance had yet to begin. Damn worms! Feel the wrath of the dwarves! The angry dwarves pushed open the gates. Supported by the belief that they could take back their homeland, the dwarves were wild and ferocious as they attacked the spider army. The spider army's attention was attracted by Chu Tian's group. Large groups of dwarves suddenly attacked from behind, catching the spider army off guard. Panic filled the air again. The spider army's morale completely collapsed and they couldn't gather it again. If it was just a few experts, as long as they ran out of spirit energy, they could still win. Now that there were thousands of dwarves attacking, the spider army still had the advantage in strength, but their fighting spirit was completely different. The mines were the dwarves' homeland, the inheritance of their ancestors, and the foundation of their lives. It was worth risking their lives for, but to the spider army, it was just a stolen territory. Their leader was dead and the territory had no meaning, so there was no need to sacrifice their lives for it. Finally, when the battle ended, less than a third of the spider army had escaped and the rest had been killed by the dwarves in the mines. The dwarves had paid less than a tenth of their casualties and obtained such a glorious result, all because of the help of these 5 outsiders. The dwarves were honest, of course they would not go back on their word. The dwarf chief led several dwarven elders to express their sincere thanks to Chu Tian before immediately saying, "We checked the warehouse. The dwarves' weapons and equipment were all stolen by those damn fellows." The dwarf chief felt his heart ache when he said this. Those were the products made by 2-3 generations of dwarves and now they had all been stolen. How could they not feel pain? Most of the forging materials are left and according to the agreement, half of it will be used to pay the commission. This is what you should receive. The dwarf's words revealed a piece of information. Cannon took away all the equipment made by the dwarves? Chu Tian emphasized this question. Of course he believed the dwarves because the dwarves would not lie. This means there is a large influence hiding behind Cannon. What are the dwarves prepared to do after taking back the Oldman mines? It wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. No matter who is behind the scenes, the dwarves have no fear. The dwarf chief firmly declared a sacred oath. The tenacious dwarves are willing to bleed to the last drop of blood for our homeland. This was really a one-track mind, a hopeless fellow. Chu Tian said in a probing voice, "Actually, I have an idea. If the dwarves can accept it, perhaps we can protect our homeland and even make the Oldman mines more prosperous than before." The dwarves were a bit in disbelief. "I never lie to people and I definitely won't lie to the friendly dwarves." Chu Tian revealed a smile and his sincere eyes were clearer than the moon's spring. "I think that the dwarves' minds have already been exposed. I wonder if the chief agrees?" The chief silently agreed. Now there were at least 7-8 powers that knew the exact location of the mines. Chu Tian continued to say, "According to the Dark Forest's rules, the Oldman Mines is like a bonfire in the Dark Forest, so it will attract countless hunters. The enemy is in the dark and the dwarves are in the light, so we can only passively take a beating. We cannot take the initiative to attack, and we cannot take the initiative to attack. Does the chief agree with this?" The chief silently agreed once again. The dwarves are not willing to give up, but they don't want their entire tribe to be exterminated. This is a very difficult matter to achieve. After all, if we want to protect our homeland, just relying on courage and determination is not enough. Chu Tian first poured cold water on the dwarves before finally saying his own thoughts. "Since the situation won't get any worse, why don't we completely open up the information about the mines and take the initiative to bring in other friendly powers? We'll unite with other small powers and create another Oldman small town? You have to know that the Oldman mines have already been robbed once. Now that the location of the mines has been revealed, it will help protect the small town. This is because it's not only you who have to follow the Dark Forest's rules. The Oldman mines had already been exposed. Any weak power in the dark forest's rules had to hide themselves. Once they were exposed, there was no way they could escape. They could either move away or wait for death. If the dwarves stubbornly chose to defend, they would be swallowed up sooner or later. Now Chu Tian's words touched the dwarves a bit. The location of the Oldman mines had already been exposed. Since it was like this, why didn't they just give up and expose it, letting all the large and small powers in the forest know about it? Chu Tian continued to patiently guide them. The Oldman clan is just a small power on the periphery of the Forest of Chaos, so it has no attraction to the large powers in the depths of the Forest of Chaos. In other words, the ones coveting the mines right now are the small and medium-sized powers on the periphery. Once the dwarves are exposed and let everyone know of the existence of this place, those small and medium-sized powers will be worried. This is because they know in their hearts that even if they occupy this place, it would be nothing more than a hot potato. This place has already been robbed by the spirit insects, so I think most powers won't take the risk. The human's words were not without reason. Chu Tian stopped here and let the dwarves think about it, so he didn't say anything else. Come, let's get to work. Chu Tian called Vivian and Yingying over to arrange the array. When the dwarves saw the actions of the humans and elves, they all felt it was very strange. First they took out 5-6 strange energy pillars, and then they drew a very strange source energy array. Space warehouse, open. They spent 2 hours to arrange the array. Of course this couldn't be compared to the laboratory. Vivian needed to personally use her spirit energy to activate the energy pillars and the array. Space twisted. Finally a black hole-like spatial structure was opened. Chu Tian immediately shouted, Dongfang, Big Sister Bing, put the materials in. Because the space warehouse's space was limited and Chu Tian didn't bring out many energy pillars, he couldn't transport all of the rewards the dwarves gave to Chu Tian, but he could at least transport the most important part. These materials were used to make the source energy cannons and storm rifles. When they saw the humans putting the materials into the space warehouse, the dwarves were all stunned. They had never seen such a strange thing before. With the energy being quickly consumed, Chu Tian knew that he had reached his limit. It's about time, close it. Alright. Vivian was covered in sweat from maintaining the stability of the source energy array. When she heard Chu Tian's order, she immediately closed the source energy array in relief. Meng Yingying said in a satisfied voice, with the support of these materials, the company will be able to make quite a few cannons. Only, our communication channel isn't open, so how will Elder Sister know that the materials have been transported? Don't worry. Vivian giggled and said, I've already completed a detection technique before I left. No matter where this space warehouse is, as long as it's opened, the laboratory will have a reaction. I think Big Sister Meng Qingwu has already found out and is calling people to unload the goods. That's good. Meng Yingying was completely relieved. We'll send the rest in a bit. The dwarves finally couldn't hold it in as they curiously surrounded them. What did you just do? This is called the space warehouse. Vivian proudly explained the space warehouse's use. Don't be envious, this is Chu Tian's unique invention. It can't be found anywhere else on the continent, it's the only one. The dwarves looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. If the dwarves could also have a space warehouse, would they still be robbed by strong enemies? Where did these humans come from? How could they have this kind of wonderful technology? Chu Tian was not willing to talk about the space warehouse. What does the chief think of my suggestion? Even if this method works, the chief said with a sigh, but for a small town that has been exposed, where would we find a reliable ally to defend it with? After all, everyone in this forest has ulterior motives. That's also true. Chu Tian had been waiting for him to say this for a long time. Actually, our miracle commerce is interested in investing in Oldman's small town. The dwarves still have control over Oldman's small town, and Miracle Commerce will use this small town as a transfer point and small trading base. Of course, as an ally, Miracle Commerce will also take on the responsibility of protecting Oldman's small town. What was Miracle Commerce? The leader of the dwarfs hesitated. Uncle Dwarf, what are you hesitating for? Vivian couldn't help saying, the space warehouse is a wonderful technology, our Miracle Commerce has a lot of it. Cooperating with our Miracle Commerce, the dwarves will not suffer a loss. The dwarves discussed with each other. They couldn't keep the Oldman mines, so why not take a gamble? Not only were these people strong, their backgrounds were not normal. Moreover, the matter of taking back the Oldman mines meant that the dwarves owed them a large favor, so most of the dwarves were willing to believe them. All right, we agree. Then, from today onwards, the Oldman mines will be changed to Oldman's small town. Chu Tian was secretly delighted. They were really too easy to trick. They had traveled tens of thousands of miles to come here, and their most important task had been completed. Miracle Commerce would establish their first stronghold on the edge of the Forest of Chaos, and this stronghold had a very important meaning. This meant that Miracle Commerce would use this as a springboard to spread their influence across the entire Forest of Chaos. They had finally taken the first step. Chapter 370. Southern Xia, Southern State City, Miracle Commerce. The 3,000 barbarian berserk soldiers were standing in neat rows with Shen Fengho and the Golden Arrow Marquis, the two Southern Summer Marquis standing on the left and right. There was also a beautiful fiery red-haired beauty standing high up on the step. Do you want to get rich? Yes. Do you want to become stronger? Yes. Do you want to have more wealth and power? Yes. Nangong Yun was holding a large loudspeaker as she spoke to the large group of barbarians. These barbarians responded in a deafening voice. They were over 2 meters tall and were wearing thick armor, holding heavy profound iron weapons in their hand. Their eyes were filled with fire as they were filled with fighting spirit. This was the first heavy berserk infantry that Miracle Commerce had spent a large amount of money to train. Miracle Commerce did not have any talented generals, so they asked the Golden Arrow Marquis and Shen Fengho to help train them. The two of them were veterans of the battlefield, and the Golden Arrow Marquis was famous for his training. Although this half a month was not long, for this kind of special army, there was no need to train their martial skills, stamina, or tactics. They just needed to instill the basic qualities of a soldier. The 3,000 barbarians had been brainwashed and trained, now they considered themselves members of Miracle Commerce. The barbarians were a barbarian race with a low status. How could they ever have a chance to stand out? Each berserker was the pride of their tribe and family. It was because of the glory and generous treatment they brought to their tribe and family that these barbarians recognized their status for the first time. Now they all wanted to go out to the battlefield to kill their enemies, to make contributions, to earn more benefits and glory for themselves, their family, and their tribe. How strong were the 3,000 barbarian soldiers? The Golden Arrow Marquis and Shen Fengho could not accurately describe it. Even if they were not equipped with Miracle Commerce's advanced weapons, once these berserkers entered a berserk state, they could fight against the strongest army of Southern Xia, the Earth Dragon Army. What kind of terrifying battle strength was this? If they were equipped with the advanced source energy weapons, this army's strength would be unimaginable. The two Marquis had galloped on the battlefield for many years. Even in the Warring States period, this kind of army was the elite of the elite. It required a large amount of resources and time to create. Miracle Commerce was able to produce one in less than a month. Now, in the barracks of the barbarian race, there were more than 10,000 barbarian soldiers preparing to train into berserkers. If Southern Xia had this kind of army, why would they need to worry about the war hounds invading their territory? Nangong Yun was very satisfied with the results of the Berserker Regiment's training. Although these barbarians did not have the qualities of elite soldiers, at least they could be trained in an orderly manner. Just having this was enough. Once a berserker activated Berserk, their combat power would increase by several times, and their sense of pain and fear would disappear. This was a troop with an unshakable morale. The materials sent back from the space warehouse had already been estimated by Miracle Commerce to be enough to make 100 source energy cannons, 500 source energy cannons, or 1,000 storm rifles. The high-level metal materials brought back from the Royal Treasury were only enough to make 4 source energy cannons, and the remaining materials were used to make a storm rifle. Chu Tian had not been in the Forest of Chaos for long, but he had already obtained several times the amount of materials. If they were all made into weapons, Miracle Commerce would have a qualitative leap. Nangong Yun was very excited that the time was right. Her strength had been growing quite fast, and she was now in the 8th awakened soul layer, but she was very unhappy being stuck in Southern State. She had long wanted to show off her skills in the Forest of Chaos. The fact that the boss could send back this many materials meant that he was doing quite well. This was a must. How could a group of locals in the Forest of Chaos be a problem for him? It was unknown when everyone would be able to move into the forest. Young Miss Nangong, a Griffin Knight, came to report, "Sir Cloud Dream Marquis has an important matter, please go to the airship factory to see her." Airship factory? Why would she go there? Nangong Yun did not ask anything else and immediately went to the large factory. This was where Southern State made the airship. The airships had a unique advantage and convenience that the company cared about, so they kept producing them. With the improvement of technology, the current airships, whether it was weight, speed, or lifespan, they could not be compared to the airships made by Chu Tian. When Nangong Yun arrived, she saw that Feng Kai-dai, Yun Yao, and the others were all here. Everyone had a confused look on their faces, not knowing why Meng Qingwu had called them over. "I want to show you something." Meng Qingwu kept them in suspense as she revealed a mysterious smile. "Come with me first." Meng Qingwu brought them into a factory with a very high level of security. 3 very strange airships immediately appeared in front of them. They were twice the size of normal airships, and their structure was very tight. The oval-shaped airbags were made from high-level demon beast skin, and there were complex source energy arrays on the surface. It could increase their floating speed, as well as resist frost, fire, and even lightning. The cabins were not simply hanging, rather they were seamlessly connected to the airbags. The cabins were made from a thin layer of hard and light crystal, which was divided into several sealed rooms. Even if they were floating 10,000 meters in the air, they would not feel the slightest bit of cold or wind. The airships were used for short to medium distance transport, therefore they pursued a higher capacity and a higher transport space. The airships in front of them had exquisite cabins, but the space was smaller, so they did not look like transport tools at all. Feng Katie's beautiful eyes sparkled. Such exquisite airships. Did Elder Sister specially make them? It's not as simple as just exquisite. Meng Qingwu made a gesture and several workers on the side opened the cabin door. "Come, let's go take a look." Several women walked into the cabin. It was very simple and clean inside. There were 2 living rooms, a storage room, and a bathroom. It was like a place where one could fly in the sky. Did Meng Qingwu want to make a flying cabin? This did not match Meng Qingwu's personality. Everyone knew that this chairman was a practical person, never chasing after fancy and impractical things. Yun Yao opened a room. "Isn't this a beast pen?" This was a place like a corridor. There was a beast pen that was several meters wide, and there was even a feeding space. There was a row of cabin doors that could be opened in front of them. This should be the Griffin's living room. Normally the Griffin would be raised here, and when they needed to use it, they could ride the Griffin to open the door on the other side and immediately leave the airship. The interior design took up most of the cabin space, but no one could see what special use this airship had. At this time, Meng Qingwu did not keep them in suspense. She opened the door to a room in the center and the girls were stunned when they saw what was inside. There was nothing inside, but there were 3 towers. One was a magnetic sound tower, one was a magnetic image tower, and one was a super wave transmission tower. No matter how stupid they were, they would be enlightened when they saw this. Then they would be filled with admiration for Meng Qingwu. You should understand now. Meng Qingwu revealed a faint smile. She was always elegant and beautiful, not showing off at all. It was like she was introducing a very normal tool. The airship structure is simple, easy to produce, and low cost. It is very practical and is not limited to transportation. I have been preparing to build this kind of industrial control ship in Central State. For this reason, I have read books on mechanical techniques and power structures, as well as studying the composition of the atmosphere. There is a still flow area around 30,000 meters above the continent. There are very few changes in the air, and it is not at a height where demon beasts are active. I can use the airship to create a mobile communication station in the sky. It had to be said. Meng Qingwu's idea was too quick. Miracle Commerce's information transmission system was limited. Even in southern Xia, there were only a few main cities that had communication stations. There was around 80% of the area that was not covered by the signal, mainly because it was very troublesome to build a communication station. Southern Xia was already this troublesome with the use of mirrors, so it was even more impossible in the Forest of Chaos. But if this special airship was used, the situation would be different. Not only would it save a lot of effort, it would allow Miracle Commerce's signal to be spread over a wider area. It would also have a high mobility and it would be easier to protect. It would also allow them to create an air attack force. Tens of thousands of meters in the air, they could calculate the flow of the atmosphere and the enemy's position. Large amounts of high-altitude bombs would be dropped and that terrifying attack would fall on the enemy's area like rain. Elder sister is truly too smart. Nangong Yun gave a heartfelt praise. Can we use these 3 airships now? Of course we can. Meng Qingwu said in a confident voice. I have prepared 3 airships to park 30-40,000 meters outside the Forest of Chaos, allowing the signal to cover Chu Tian's area. This way, communication will be much easier. Each airship can have 15 Griffin Knights, so I'll leave this task to little sister Kaidai and little sister Yun Yao. Alright. The 2 girls immediately agreed. The more of these airships the better. It would be best if there were several hundred of them, covering wherever they wanted. This would allow Miracle Commerce's influence to spread to every corner of the Forest of Chaos. What about me? I can't forget you. Meng Qingwu said to Nangong Yun. I've received a message from Chu Tian in the space warehouse. He has already gained a foothold in the forest, but he seems to have caused a bit of trouble. He needs the Berserker army to send reinforcements, so you can lead our army to meet up with Chu Tian. The Berserker army's source energy weapons can't keep up, but I will urge the company to speed up the production. It should be around the time you meet up and I'll send people through the space warehouse. Meng Qingwu arranged everything like a strategist. Boss is in trouble? How could this be? I'll go right now. Nangong Yun was filled with fighting spirit. I just wanted to test the might of the Berserker army. There shouldn't be anything that can threaten the Berserker army on the edge of the forest, but we can't be too careless. This army is too important to us. Meng Qingwu had to remind Nangong Yun, after all, this fellow was a bit brash. We have to be low-key. Now is not the time to attract the attention of the large powers. Also bring a few more communication devices. The airships will be faster than you, so wherever you go will be covered with signals. You have to keep in contact with me and Chu Tian. Understood. On the second day they set off. The 3 airships slowly rose into the air, smoothly reaching several tens of thousands of meters in the air. The air here was thin, but it was very stable. All the weather changes happened below and the surroundings were empty. Even if they entered the forest, they wouldn't see any demon beasts. The 3 large airships slowly moved towards the forest of chaos like this, preparing to connect Miracle Commerce and Oldman's small town. In a few days, Oldman's small town would be able to use products like radios. Nangong Yun led the 3,000 trained Berserker heavy infantry into the forest from southern state, beginning a long journey. Chapter 371. There was no doubt that Oldman's small town would be filled with waves. This mine that the dwarves had operated for 100 years would actually be turned into a small underground city. It would have a complete water circulation system, indoor plantations, strong defenses, and comfortable houses. It would be the edge of the forest of chaos and one of the safest places to live. The dwarves publicly announced that Oldman's small town would be the edge of the forest of chaos, the safest and most prosperous market. The dwarves even welcomed the various clans to live here, making Oldman's small town their common home. All the powers that protected the small town would share the taxes and wealth of the small town according to their contributions. This incomparably novel management model was spread in the nearby temporary towns through the posting of notices everywhere. Within a few days, it had spread to the surrounding hundreds of kilometers. Everyone was dumbfounded by this method. Common management? Shared benefits? Long-term development? When did the dwarves become this naive? Could it be the dwarves didn't know that the forest was a group of people who ate alone? They never pursued a long-term, only daring to make a one-time deal. Everyone followed the cruel dark forest law, wishing they could hide in the darkness and not be discovered by hunters. However, the dwarves were like a group of people standing around a bonfire shouting, "Quickly come over, I'm here." This kind of bold method would definitely bring disaster. The forest of chaos did not lack hunters, and there was no lack of bandits that lived by plundering, so revealing their position was no different from seeking death. As for this ridiculous suggestion, no one cared about it. But the surrounding villages were stirred up. After Saldo's small town collapsed, there were several villages that did not have a suitable place to trade. When they heard this news, they couldn't help wanting to come and take a look. When the several villages arrived at Oldman's small town, they were all stunned by the scene in front of them. There was a giant screen hanging at the entrance, and the mirror-like screen was playing the situation of Oldman's small town. It introduced the location and characteristics of the small town's market, introduced the benefits of doing business in Oldman's small town, and also introduced the strategies for merchants to do business in the small town. This kind of novel advertising method made everyone's eyes light up. But everyone quickly found that they were surprised too early because when they entered Oldman's small town, an even more shocking scene appeared in front of them. Without a doubt, this was an underground city. There were many underground cities in the forest of chaos. Underground cities were hidden, sealed, dark, and airtight. However, Oldman's small town completely subverted people's ideas. Not only was the air flowing very smoothly, the most important thing was that the small town was brightly lit. Huge electric lamps were hung high up, their light enough to illuminate the entire town. The underground palace built by the dwarves was grand and magnificent, and under the illumination of the lights, it looked especially dignified. Loudspeakers were placed on both sides to guide the guests. "It's amazing!" The village chief of Rabbit Village looked at the light in amazement. "What kind of light is this? It doesn't look like a crystal lamp, so why is it so bright?" When people entered the Oldman small town's market, they found that it was deserted and there were almost no people here, but the dwarves had already listed some goods. Of course, they came from Miracle Commerce. Other than high-quality pills and talismans, there were also some simple and practical things, such as canned food, alcohol, electric lamps, cameras, and some of the more scarce daily necessities in the forest. Chu Tian handed over all the goods to the dwarves to sell, and the profits were very generous. The ingredients of these goods weren't high quality, but the goods were very fresh, which immediately attracted the attention of the villagers. Some people bought a batch of goods and went back. As long as someone tried, then it would be much easier. Oldman's small town's special goods were spread through other black markets, small towns, and underground market. In just a few days, there were more and more people coming to Oldman's small town. It was the same as before, most of them were people from small villages. The Oldman Mines Market did not just sell goods, it also bought various resources, demon beast meat, herbs, ores, and leather. As long as it was a common material, they would buy it, and the price given was very fair. People became even crazier. The villages could more or less take out a few of these things. If they were taken to other markets, they wouldn't even be sold for half the price in Oldman's small town. With a simple comparison, even a fool would make the right choice. The enticement of the Oldman small town's official market attracted a lot of people. In around a week, there were over 100 small villages and small tribes that came to the small town, becoming more and more popular. There were even people from far away who were prepared to make the long journey here to trade. From the moment Oldman's small town was opened until now, there were no hunters or bandits that came to loot it. People analyzed the reason and finally came up with a reasonable conclusion. First, there were 5,000 brave dwarves in the Oldman mines. Normal small-scale hunters and bandits did not dare take the risk. Second, the Oldman mines had already been looted once, and the most valuable weapons and equipment had been taken away. Third, the Oldman mines had already been exposed and everyone knew about this place. What meaning was there in attacking it? Instead, it was possible that a large power would come looking for it. Fourth, the Oldman mines had begun to openly recruit allies. The goods that came from the market clearly did not come from the hands of the dwarf. This meant that there were other powers involved in the Oldman mines, and they did not dare enter without investigating it clearly. Like this, Oldman's small town danced on the tip of a knife, not attracting any unexpected calamity. Instead, it made this small town famous. There was no large power protecting it, but no one dared to move against it. It was unknown when this delicate balance would be broken, but before it was broken, it was safe. There were large benefits here, and no one would go against benefits. Now it was not only the small villages that came to Oldman's small town to trade, there were some small and medium-sized powers that couldn't sit still and sent people to participate. The small town was filled with a flourishing scene. The dwarves were very happy about this because after the small town's market was opened, not only would they receive a high percentage of the goods sold by miracle commerce, they would also receive a bit of profit from other transactions. If this continued, the dwarves would quickly become rich. The dwarf chief came looking for Chu Tian with a worried expression. Although the market is lively, no one is willing to become our ally and defend Oldman with us. If this continues and the small town becomes more prosperous, it will eventually attract a disaster. When strength and wealth were not equal, it was the time of crisis. Once Oldman's small town became prosperous, the accumulated wealth of the small town would increase, and there would be more and more resources. When it reached a certain level, it would attract people's greed. Don't worry, this is very normal. Chu Tian was very confident in the development of the situation. Oldman's small town has just been established, and this kind of joint management is a new concept in the forest. When something new appears, people will need more time to observe it. Moreover, because the small town is open to the public, we will be at the heart of the struggle. It is normal for others to question our strength, so what we need now is a chance to display our strength. The Oldman small town's management model was indeed very advanced in the forest of chaos. With many powers managing it, the small town's profits would be shared. Whoever gave the small town more protection would obtain more taxes and benefit. He believed that some medium-sized and large-sized powers would be interested in this and send a part of their forces to the small town, forming a joint security force. Like this, the marauders would not dare act rashly. The dwarves were not afraid of losing control of the mines. After all, they were only sharing the market. The dwarfs could still mine on the third floor and live as usual. At this time, the surrounding space began to fluctuate. Chu Tian, there's a situation. What is going on? We've found a bit of information. Vivian anxiously said to Chu Tian. There is a large group of spirit insects moving in the west, and they seem to be coming our way. I suspect they are Cannon's companions. How many are there? I'm not too clear, but there should be at least several tens of thousands. They're finally here? From the moment Oldman's small town was opened, the small town would inevitably be challenged. Chu Tian was already prepared in his heart. As long as he became famous in the forest, there would be an endless stream of people coming. The spirit insects are good at digging holes, we have to be on guard. Chu Tian first wrote a letter in the space warehouse to ask the young miss for help. When he opened the space warehouse again after half a day, the letter had already been taken away, and there were over 1,000 landmines in its place. Chu Tian understood the young miss' meaning and immediately called Vivian over to have her bury the landmines. These landmines were buried around 10 kilometers away from the small town and were buried around 10 meters underground. There were large amounts of tree roots on top, so it was not easy to trigger them on the surface. If something came from underground, it would be blown to pieces. In 2 days, the news of the spirit insect army attacking Oldman's small town spread like wildfire. The small town that had become lively with great difficulty instantly became deserted. Each village did their best to hide, avoiding being caught up in this battle. At the same time, they were paying close attention to this battle. Whether Oldman's small town was strong or weak, it would be decided in this battle. It wasn't just the small powers paying attention, even the large powers on the edge of the forest were paying close attention. When the battle was about to erupt, Chu Tian received the news that the young miss had used the space warehouse to transport large amounts of source energy weapons. This forest had already been covered by Miracle Commerce's signal. Chu Tian contacted Nangong Yun through the communication device, and the 3,000 berserkers had already arrived at the Oldman mines. Chu Tian's heart instantly calmed down. With the source energy equipment, the berserkers, and the dwarves helping them, what was there to worry about? Chapter 372. The spider Marquis Elvis was filled with rage. This was because his younger cousin, the spider Count Cannon, had been killed by a group of lowly dwarves. They were all descendants of the spider queen Alexis. Alexis was one of the oldest spirit insects in the Forest of Chaos, and her descendants were spread throughout the Forest of Chaos. Although they had their own influences, Cannon was Elvis's younger cousin from the same father, so they had a close relationship. These damned dwarves actually dared to kill his little brother. This was simply a provocation to Queen Alexis. Exterminate them. Suck their blood dry. Kill all of them. Elvis found the last 2 brothers with the title of Count and gathered the spider people on the edge of the forest. There was a total of 60,000 people, more than 10 times the dwarf. With these 3 powerful spider nobles leading the way, the trivial several thousand dwarves were just small fish and meat waiting to be sacrificed on the altar. The spider army charged into the valley where Oldman's small town was. The dwarves' mines are in front of us. Should we directly attack them? They were only 20-30 kilometers from Oldman's small town. With the spider army's speed, they could charge in and attack in one breath. The dwarves' mines are very strong. Send 30,000 people to dig into the ground, and the other 30,000 will attack from the outside with me. Immediately move out. Elvis passed down his orders. The spider people began to dig. The spider people had special bodies and cultivated earth-attributed cultivation techniques, so they could easily dig the ground and even move through the ground. Attack! Seeing that half of the army had entered the ground, Elvis did not plan on scouting. It was just a trivial 5,000 dwarves, there was nothing to scout. They would just charge forward and tear them to pieces. However, just as Elvis gave his order, a girl's figure appeared in front of the spider army. This girl was wearing tree clothes and a flower crown. Her feet were bare, and she was petite and beautiful. She stood straight in front of the spider army, blocking their path. Elf? Where did this elf come from? Elvis stood at the front of the army. When he saw the elf suddenly appear, he was a bit stunned before angrily shouting, "Who are you?" Vivian was too lazy to bother with him. She just walked step by step towards the tens of thousands of spider army. Her steps looked very slow, but they were actually very fast. In just a short while, she appeared in front of the spider army. This made the spider people fall into an uproar. They did not know what medicine this elf was taking. Kill! Elderweiss didn't care. Since they dared to block our way, they should just die here. A wave of poisoned arrows that were enough to turn the other side's petite body into a hedgehog flew over. Who would have thought that Vivian would not show any fear, even remaining indifferent? She did not make any defenses as she continued to advance towards the spider army. What the hell? Is there something wrong with this elf's head? Just as the beautiful elf was about to be turned into a porcupine, a shocking scene unfolded. The arrows pierced through Vivian's body, but they didn't pierce through her body. Instead, they pierced through her body without any resistance, and all of them stuck into a large rock behind her. Missed? Impossible. Could it be an illusion or a ghost? That's not right. This is clearly a real living person. Acting all mysterious. Elderweiss pulled out a spear and shot it at Vivian. This spear was imbued with powerful essence force, but the result was exactly the same as before. The spear landed on Vivian's body without any resistance and directly pierced through her body. Boom! The spear struck the boulder like a bolt of lightning, instantly crushing the boulder into powder. What kind of monster are you? Elderweiss' face turned livid and the other spider people went into an uproar because Vivian was already less than 20 meters away. She raised her hand and sent a slash at Elderweiss. Elderweiss instantly sensed the spatial fluctuations. A spatial attack. No matter how strong the defense was, it was meaningless against space. As long as the attacker could overcome the spatial resistance of the object in space to complete the attack, this attack would ignore any defense. So, once a spatial attack was used, any resistance was meaningless. Elderweiss reflexively pulled back and dodged, but a spatial slash slashed at his left shoulder. As a result, one of his arms was directly cut off. Damn! Kill him! Countless spider people were stirred up and all kinds of attacks rained down. Vivian completely ignored these attacks and allowed the dense barrage of attacks to pass through her body. She charged into the spider army like a ghost, and those arrows passed through Vivian's body and hit the other spider army soldiers, causing quite a bit of damage to her own people. Another spatial slash was sent out. The spider count gave a pitiful cry as it was cut in half. Elderweiss angrily shouted, "Don't let her lock on to you." The spider army was filled with fear. This elf with innate spatial energy could kill any one of them with a raise of her hand, so why did their attacks have no effect on this elf at all? Elvis couldn't explain everything. He could only summon his source spirit and continuously release his spirit energy to cover his surroundings. The higher the energy or mass in the space, the more energy it would take to use a spatial attack. Now that things had reached this stage, he could only use this method. Vivian sent out 4-5 spatial slashes in a row. Elderweiss enveloped his entire body with his extremely powerful essence energy. Although he was not strong enough to resist spatial attacks, it was still a little difficult for Vivian to repel these abilities and complete her spatial manipulation. Thus, the speed at which the spatial slashes were formed was not fast enough, and Elderweiss was able to dodge them every time. There wasn't much spirit energy left. Vivian knit her brows. She gave up on Elderweiss and immediately raised her hand. The spatial dagger source spirit appeared above her head, and she aimed at the other spider count. Random spatial slashes. The spider count also released spirit energy to stop the spatial attacks, but his strength was lower than Elderweiss, so Vivian could quickly finish her attacks. She instantly sent out 7-8 spatial slashes that he could not dodge at all. No! Elder Weiss's eyes filled with rage. The last little brother had been cut to pieces. Vivian was a bit tired and her spirit energy was almost out. If the void escaping effect disappeared, she would be in great danger. Since she had already done enough, she would leave the rest of the battle to everyone else. She cut open space and left. The whole attack lasted less than 2 minutes. The mysterious elf appeared like a ghost among the tens of thousands of soldiers. She ignored the crazy attacks and took away one of Elvis's arms. She also killed 2 spider earls, who were not weak at all. Then, she swaggered away. Not a single hair was hurt during the whole process. The spider army felt a chill run down their spines. Hong, hong, hong. At this time, several explosions came from the direction of Oldman's small town, causing the ground to tremble. It was like an earthquake. It was clear that the mines had been triggered. The mines made the drilling spider soldiers dizzy. They had no choice but to crawl out of the ground, and there were quite a few of them who were injured. There are many traps in the ground, we can't pass through them. Ah, ah, ah. Elder Weiss angrily raised his spear. Kill, kill, kill. Attack the dwarves' mines. I want to tear these damn things into 10,000 pieces. When the spider army was prepared to gather, large amounts of round objects fell from both sides of the canyon. When these ordinary things fell into the middle of the spider army, they immediately exploded. It was a large pile of source energy grenades. Nangong Yun picked up a storm rifle and led several thousand barbarians, standing out from both sides of the canyon. She looked down at the spider people in the canyon. Annihilate them! Over 100 storm rifles, several dozen source energy cannons, 4 source energy cannons, and everyone else had at least a source energy submachine gun. The moment Nangong Yun gave the order, the wild storm of energy bullets covered the canyon like a curtain of light. The dense firepower of the source energy firearms and the source energy cannons exploded several times, directly evaporating several dozen spider people. The source energy cannons continued to fire, targeting areas where there were many people, instantly causing heavy casualties. The spider army began to wildly scatter because this was no longer a battle, but rather a bloody massacre. This kind of intense and dense attack, they did not have any methods to fight back. Activate the Berserk transformation. Nangong Yun saw that the bullets were almost used up and immediately used the loudspeaker to loudly order, "This is your chance to gain merit. Let them see the might of a berserker." Roar, roar, roar. The 3,000 barbarians let out inhuman roars. They put down the burning hot guns in their hands and their bodies turned red. Their meridians were like centipedes twisting under their skin, and their eyes could no longer be seen, only leaving behind a wild scarlet color. Kill. The 3,000 barbarians raised their incomparably heavy profound iron weapons and jumped down from both sides of the canyon. There was no formation or tactics, they were like meteors falling from the sky. They only had a single goal in their minds: kill the enemy and gain merit. The barbarian berserker swung his battle axe at a spider race soldier. That terrifying strength shattered the other side's armor and weapon, instantly collapsing a large part of the mountain. That spider race soldier had already turned into a pile of bones, flesh, organs, and armor that had been crushed into a ball. There were no fancy cultivation techniques, just incomparably pure strength, a strength without any embellishments. The barbarian berserkers released their strength to the limit. As long as the spider people were hit by their weapons, even if it was just a little bit, they would be crushed to pieces. The barbarian berserkers had a thick, profound iron armor that the spider people found hard to break. Moreover, they had lost their sense of pain and fear, only having a wild rage and a desire to kill. They were simply a group of human meat grinders that could not be stopped. Although there weren't many berserkers, their battle strength was overwhelming. The spider army could be considered a peak elite army in the kingdom, but in front of the berserkers, they were like paper, not having any ability to resist at all. Kill! The Oldman's small town gates were pushed open and 5,000 dwarves charged out. They were completely stunned by the scene in front of them. The entire valley was filled with blood, and there were broken corpses all over the ground. There was not a single complete body to be found. Several thousand warriors covered in blood, brains, and other viscous things slowly walked out, just like demons crawling out of hell. The dwarves were completely stunned. Were these outsiders all demons? Chapter 373. The dwarves were standing at the gates of Oldman's small town. Their faces were filled with respect and awe, welcoming the triumphant return of their king. Dong, 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 dong. Although the heavy footsteps were messy, they were full of strength. The armor that was stained with blood and pieces of flesh reeked of blood, and the weapons that were coated with a red and white sticky substance were shrouded in a thick murderous aura, as if the souls that were taken away by them were still lingering. The dwarves swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Terrifying, too terrifying. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't dare believe it. An army of 3,000 could destroy enemies several times their number, and the spider army did not have any strength to resist under their terrifying firepower. Reporting to boss, Nangong Yun came over and said, "We didn't disappoint the mission and destroyed the enemy. Our army suffered over 100 casualties, and over 30 of our brave warriors died. Only 30 or so died in battle." The dwarves were stunned by this number. "It's been hard on you," Chu Tian announced. "The families of each warrior that died will receive a permanent allowance from Miracle Commerce and will receive 10 times the compensation according to the kingdom's standard. The other warriors performed well in this battle, so they will all be greatly rewarded." The berserkers' eyes turned hot. The barbarians were a low-status bandit race, but now that they had become Miracle Commerce's honored berserkers, this was a large change in their fate. Moreover, Miracle Commerce's benefits were very generous. Not only did they train them to become berserkers for free, they were also given high soldier treatment and special care from their families. This allowed the berserkers to not have any worries. "Bring out the wine and meat. Let our warriors drink to their heart's content." When the berserkers heard this, they all excitedly roared out. Actually, after this battle, the berserkers were very hungry, so having a meal now was exactly what they wanted. Meng Qingwu had already made arrangements and transported a large amount of high-quality food from the space warehouse. These barbarian berserkers didn't even take off their armor and directly began to eat and drink. That fierce and wild appearance made the dwarves feel inferior. The berserkers could clearly feel that after this bloody battle and crazily eating, their strength was much stronger than before. The injuries they received in the battle healed in less than 2 hours, and they all felt full of energy. Their fighting spirit soared into the sky, wishing they could immediately fight another battle. This was the specialty of berserkers. This was a troop that grew stronger and braver as they fought. In the process of training a berserker, there was no need to consume precious natural treasures. All they needed to do was ensure that they could eat and drink well. They could extract vitality from the meat of high-level magical beasts and improve their strength through continuous bloody battles. Ordinary injuries could be quickly healed, and their strength seemed to be endless. As long as they ensured that there was an adequate supply of food, they could fight for 10 days and 10 nights without rest. Once a berserker entered a berserk state, with an axe or hammer, even an awakened soul cultivator would be smashed to death. If he was equipped with Miracle Commerce's source energy weapons, he would be invincible. The only drawback was that the berserkers were too violent. After the battlefield looked like it had been squashed by tens of thousands of tomatoes. It was difficult to find a complete corpse. All of them were a mixture of armor, blood, and flesh. So, it was difficult to determine whether the important targets had been killed or not. It was against humanity. It was against humanity. Chu Tian was too lazy to care about this. He ordered Dongfang Haoren, "Burn them all." After Dongfang Howren experienced the strength of the Berserker army, he was filled with admiration towards Chu Tian. If Chu Tian had appeared in southern Xia 5 years earlier, no, 2 years earlier, or even a year earlier, would southern Xia have fallen to this point? Yes. Dongfang Howren led people to clean up the battlefield. Large amounts of corpses were piled up into several small mountains. Finally, at dusk, a fire was lit and they were instantly burned to ashes. Black smoke slowly filled the forest. This was the smell of death. The nearby races were all looking in the direction of Oldman's small town. When they saw the black smoke rising, they knew that the battle was already over. Oldman's small town was holding an important meeting. There was a large round table filled with people. Half of them were humans, half of them were dwarves, and there was even an elf who was currently discussing something. Finally, the dwarf chief stood up. After our dwarf elder group's evaluation and discussion, we have allowed the Berserker army to be stationed in the small town, becoming the protectors of Oldman's small town. Their battle strength is over 75% of the small town's total battle strength, so Mr. Chu Tian already has at least 75% of the small town's ownership. The other dwarves nodded to each other. This was a conclusion that everyone was satisfied with. Actually, the barbarian Berserker army was over 75% of the small town's battle strength? Perhaps it was over 90%. Only Chu Tian and Chu Tian's team were willing to deliberately underestimate themselves, leaving the dwarves a bit of face and also giving the dwarves a bit of benefit. Mr. Chu Tian's army is the strongest protector of the small town, and you have obtained the most ownership of the small town, as well as the approval of the dwarf elder group. According to Oldman's small town's new management plan, you will automatically become the mayor of Oldman's small town. I hope you can properly manage Oldman's small town and bring prosperity to Oldman's small town. Meng Yingying, Vivian, and the others revealed looks of joy. The small town was small, but it was still a town. In the chaotic forest of chaos, he had his first territory. Starting from being the mayor of the small town, this was a good start. Chu Tian was very satisfied with this result. Many thanks for the dwarves' trust. I will do my best to contribute to the development of the small town. Before Chu Tian helped the dwarves take back the mine, he had already had his eyes on this place. The Oldman mine had been built by the dwarves for over 100 years, so it was now very complete and sturdy. The surrounding terrain was easy to defend, and adding in the fact that it was on the edge of the forest of chaos, it wouldn't attract the attention of any large characters. There were no strong enemies around, so it met Chu Tian's requirements. However, Chu Tian was not stupid enough to directly make this request to the dwarves. The dwarves had a strong sense of territory, so this matter could only be handed over by them. He couldn't take the initiative to ask the dwarves, otherwise it would arouse the disgust of the dwarves. Therefore, Chu Tian did not reveal his goal. He first obtained the dwarves' gratitude and trust before inciting the dwarves to reform the Oldman mine. After the reform of the Oldman mine, the mine was the mine and the small town was the small town. In fact, it had become two different areas. The dwarves' mine still existed, but only 40% of it was used as the dwarves' permanent living area. The other 60% was turned into a small town, which was used as a completely open area for reform. Finally, Chu Tian led his army into the small town. Chu Tian's strength quickly surpassed the dwarves, and the dwarves were willing to give the mayor position to Chu Tian. Actually, the dwarves did not lose out. The dwarves still had the mine, they just outsourced the residential area and empty space they didn't need. Chu Tian's mayor had full control over this area, so he wouldn't interfere with the dwarves' mine and living area, so they were just taking what they needed. The Oldman small town was like a joint construction project. The dwarves were the initiators and the largest shareholders. Now that Chu Tian had decided to invest in the small town, Chu Tian's shares had increased to 70 to 80% and the dwarves' shares had decreased to less than 20%. Chu Tian had become the largest investor in the small town and naturally became the mayor. The dwarves had paid a bit, but they had gained a lot. First, their safety was greatly guaranteed, solving an urgent problem. Next was the potential income and future appreciation. The dwarves always had shares in Oldman's small town, so even if they didn't do anything each year, they would still receive dividends. Moreover, the more prosperous Oldman's small town was, the more the mine would increase in value. 40% of the area was in the hands of the dwarves, and the dwarves could use this area to earn large amounts of profit. Chu Tian was the mayor. Since he was the mayor, of course he had to do something. Chu Tian directly proposed to the dwarves, "We need to find more reliable partners. The more allies we have, the faster Oldman's small town will develop and our position will become more stable." Chu Tian had already thought it through. In a place like the Forest of Chaos, Miracle Commerce could not do it alone. If Miracle Commerce wanted to quickly gather their strength and expand their influence, they had to distribute the benefits to more people and gain more allies for themselves. This way, they could quickly open up channels for their company. The outcome of this battle caused a large wave in the forest. Oldman's small town's fame rose on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. Now everyone understood why Oldman's small town dared to be this arrogant, publicly going against the dark forest laws. According to Oldman's small town's current display of strength, perhaps they had already reached the level of a large power on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. This level of power was basically the overlord of the area. As long as they didn't attract any large characters from the depths of the forest, it wouldn't matter if they were exposed because the surrounding powers couldn't pose a threat. Even if they could pose a threat, they wouldn't risk both sides to fight this kind of meaningless battle. At this time, Oldman's small town announced a recruitment plan. They would take out around 30% of their ownership to give to their allies. The Oldman's small town's mayor was very bold and actually took the initiative to invite other powers to join them, participating in the management of Oldman's small town. If it was before, this would have been a very risky move. In the Forest of Chaos, a person's heart was hard to predict. Who knew if others would use the name of joining to stab you in the back? But it was different now. In the two battles with the spider race, Oldman's small town had already displayed its strength. The dwarves must have found a strong ally. There was no one that dared to provoke Oldman's small town because Oldman's small town's strength far surpassed its value. Who would chew on this hard and nutritious stone? So with Oldman's small town's proposal, there were many powers that were interested in it. After all, this was an innovation in the forest, and everyone wanted to know what kind of power was standing behind the dwarves. Chapter 374. Not only was Oldman's small town openly recruiting partners, they were also recruiting warriors in the small towns within several hundred kilometers. If recruiting partners was said to be roping in a power alliance, then recruiting warriors with high treatment was roping in a wandering person. The experts living in seclusion in the Forest of Chaos could not be underestimated. There was no lack of hermits who had to live in the Forest of Chaos to escape disasters or for revenge. There were also some experts who had their tribes destroyed and their homes destroyed. They relied on their strength to survive and finally wandered around. This group of people did not have a fixed residence and mainly appeared in small towns. They dared to live in places that others did not dare, since they were alone. Since they could live in small towns in the forest, why wouldn't they dare live in Oldman's small town? Not to mention that after joining Oldman's small town, they would have a high status and treatment. During this period of time, there were many people coming to join. The matter of Oldman's small town opening their alliance made quite a few surrounding powers interested. This kind of innovative management method made these people think about it, and finally some tribes decided to give it a try. There was an orc tribe, an ogre tribe, a wolf tribe, and a bear tribe among them. The four great tribes were first-class powers in the surrounding 1,000 miles. Although they did not dare ignore the dark forest law, they would not move around like the small and medium-sized powers. This was because as long as they were not coveted by the experts in the depths of the Forest of Chaos, it was fine if their living area was exposed. The 4 tribes sent out envoys at around the same time, and they arrived at Oldman's small town at almost the same time. On one hand, they were here to investigate, but on the other hand, they were here to gain a deeper understanding of Oldman's small town system. Oldman's small town could accommodate over 100,000 people, and this was under the condition of being self-sufficient. If Oldman's small town gave up on being self-sufficient and relied on miracle commerce to supply them with food and supplies, it would not be a problem for the number of people to increase by 3 times. This was something the other tribes in the forest would find hard to achieve. No matter how strong the tribes were, they could only move around 100 kilometers. All their food, leather, materials, and supplies were obtained from within their range of movement. It was because of this that any tribe's development would have their own bottleneck. When their population reached a certain amount, the resources within their range of movement would not be able to support that many people, which would trigger a survival crisis. As for how to solve this crisis, it was very simple. The first was to move and find an area with more resources. The second was to split. A tribe would split into 2 tribes and the population would be scattered, reducing the pressure on survival. The third was war. Not only could war consume too much population, but it could also plunder other people's resources to replenish themselves. Any tribe or small town in the Forest of Chaos would have a development bottleneck. Oldman's small town did not have this kind of bottleneck. Oldman's small town could give up on being self-sufficient. With the support of the spatial transportation system and the entire southern Xia, supporting several million people in theory was not a problem. The 4 tribe messengers were very satisfied with Oldman's small town's scale and environment. There was modern technology everywhere in the small town, which made these tribes feel very pleasantly surprised. Oldman's small town was in the valley and it was an underground city. To most races, it was a very strong city. There were also 5,000 excellent dwarven craftsmen here, who could continuously forge high-quality equipment and machinery for the town. If they could become partners of the town, then it would be much more convenient to buy dwarven equipment, which was something that the major tribes especially valued. After the emissary toured the town for a few days, Oldman's small town's mayor held a meeting. The green-skinned orcs with large fangs, the ogres that were twice as tall and 4 times as strong as humans, the wolf spirit beast that the southern summer humans considered a great enemy, and the bear spirit beast that he had never seen before, but was one of the strongest spirit beasts. When these several races sat at the same table at the same time, everyone had a strange feeling in their hearts. Actually, these fellows' hearts were also very strange. They thought that the Oldman small town's mayor would be a dwarf or a barbarian, but who would have thought that the fellow sitting in front of them would actually be a white-looking young human? Humans were one of the most civilized races on the continent and their technology developed very quickly. However, there weren't many humans in the Forest of Chaos, so they did not have a deep impression of humans. Only they couldn't understand how a human like this could become the mayor. The dwarf chief introduced, "This human is the founder of Miracle Commerce, Chu Tian. He and his army have the highest proportion in the small town's allied army, so he was elected as the mayor. Since everyone wants to join the small town's allied army, then please take a look at our small town's management rules." Chu Tian had specially prepared a document in 3 languages, separately written in the orc, ogre, and spirit beast languages. These documents are very clearly written. Oldman's small town will open up 30% of the territory to recruit allies. Allies do not need to invest any materials or money, they will only be distributed according to the small town's allied army. The first time they join cannot exceed 5%. We need the most elite soldiers. After the soldiers enter the small town, unless the tribe asks to withdraw from the alliance, The original tribe will not be allowed to control them. The soldiers that join the small town's allied army must follow the small town's rules, otherwise they will be considered a violation. Wait! An orc shouted out in a somewhat dissatisfied voice, "Why should our soldiers be managed by you?" That's right. The wolf man also expressed his dissatisfaction. My tribe's soldiers must be managed by my tribe. Chu Tian gave two cold laughs. Isn't this request a bit laughable? A territory can only have one will and one voice, otherwise it will fall into chaos. You don't want to pay an army in exchange for a chaotic town without a future, right? For the safety and development of the small town, this is a basic principle that cannot be changed. This was a must. If the army was stationed in Oldman's small town, and the tribes could freely control the army, wouldn't that be inviting a wolf into the house? What if they rebelled in the future? Although Chu Tian liked to take risks, he wasn't that stupid. Therefore, the foreign troops would be forcefully divided and then given to the barbarians or dwarves they trusted. Using time and systems, they would slowly turn them into their own army. Only by doing this could they ensure that there would be no trouble in the future. The foreign races discussed it with each other. A bear tribesman stood up. Even if we accept this request, each person can only have 5% of the small town. This is too little. Even if the small town becomes prosperous in the future, we won't get any money. Our bear tribe's soldiers, if we send 1,000 elites, their battle strength will surpass this ratio. The bear tribe was very confident in their soldiers. But the ogres were even more confident than the bear tribesmen. The ogre's tall and sturdy body stood up. Our ogres are invulnerable and have boundless strength. We only need 500 soldiers to surpass this ratio. The barbarians and dwarves, although they were not bad soldiers, how could they compare to the incomparably large and dangerous ogres? Chu Tian revealed a faint smile. This battle strength is not just words. As for how much it should be, we still need to evaluate it. Relax, our evaluation is very fair and we won't let the allies suffer a loss. For the safety and stability of the small town, as well as the stability of the allied army, the first army sent in cannot surpass 5% of the allied army's strength. As for the benefits, it is not as simple as the small town's dividends. The 4 foreign races were stunned. Then what other benefits are there? First, allies can become Miracle Commerce's partners, and you can directly buy things from Miracle Commerce. Food, talismans, medicine, equipment, and even some things you can't imagine, we have the ability to provide them, and they are all good and cheap. Similarly, you can take your excess resources and even directly buy resources from the forest and sell them to Miracle Commerce. We will buy them at a price that surpasses the market price in the Forest of Chaos. Any amount is fine. Any amount is fine. The 4 foreign races revealed looks of disbelief and information. If they could really do this, just this alone would give their tribe endless benefits. If they could buy food and medicine at any time, then when the tribe was suffering from famine or plague, they could save the entire tribe from disaster. As for Miracle Commerce buying materials at a price higher than the market price, this was a large chance for these races to become rich. They were large tribes, so they had many channels for resources. There were many small towns and even cities that had trading points. If they could use these trading points to buy low and sell high, they could make quite a bit of money from this process. Second, after the Allied army is formed, we will become allies. Allied tribes will not only have special privileges in Oldman's small town, we will also provide you with living areas. Other than that, when our allies are threatened, Oldman's small town has the obligation to help our allies pass through the difficulties. This kind of help is not just material. If it is within our abilities, Oldman's small town will send an allied army to help. There were too many races in the forest. No one trusted each other. If the various clans took out an army here, in a sense, it was like buying insurance for their tribe. If the tribe was in trouble, whether it was a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, Oldman's small town would help them and the situation would be much better. Not bad, not bad, this was a cooperation worth trying. After the 4 foreign races understood this, they immediately returned to their tribes. Actually, there was no need to consider it anymore. These tribes began to select soldiers, preparing to join the Forest Allied Army. Chapter 375. These 4 large tribes had decided to station their armies in Oldman's small town and let their clansmen join the Allied army. The news quickly spread through the various forest trading points. Oldman's small town was about to become popular. Among the powers in this area, these 4 large tribes were among the best. Oldman's small town's performance was very eye-catching, defeating the tens of thousands of Spider Army twice. Although their strength was not clear, they should not be inferior. Now that Oldman's small town had won over these 4 large allies, it would be hard for it not to become popular in the future. Several days ago, everyone felt that this was the most dangerous small town in the forest. At this moment, everyone felt that this was perhaps the safest small town in the forest. Oldman's small town's pioneering management method was something that had never appeared in the Forest of Chaos before. Anyone could become the master or manager of a small town, turning a small town into a place governed by countless powers. This was without a doubt a first. In the evening, the 4 large tribes' armies arrived. Chu Tian brought Yingying and Nangong Yun out to welcome them. When Nangong Yun saw the densely packed army, her eyes almost popped out. Damn, this many foreign races, are we really going to let them live in our small town? Are you sure there won't be any trouble? 3,000 green-skinned orcs, all of them fat and strong. They had axes hanging from their waists and strange little braids, so they were filled with an untamed wildness. 3,000 wolf tribe spirit beasts were also neatly standing in the small town, each one carrying a blade on their waist. These wolf tribe people were experts in tracking and their claws were sharp weapons, easily tearing apart the enemy's body. 1,000 bear tribe spirit beasts were like 1,000 iron towers, each one being close to 3 meters tall. That broad physique, that tall and sturdy body, made people feel fear. Those thick bare paws could crush profound iron with a single slap. The most ridiculous was the 500 ogres. Ogres were one of the most notorious races in the forest. They were pure carnivores with huge bodies and huge appetite. Once there were too many ogres living in groups, famine was a common occurrence. Once the ogres were hungry. That was a very terrifying matter. Because hunger could destroy ogres' rationality, they could wildly eat anything made of meat, whether it was animal, foreign race, or human. It was because of this that they had this kind of nickname. Strictly speaking, ogres weren't considered an intelligent race. They were an existence between magical beasts and intelligent life forms. The ogres did not have a cultivation technique or the ability to awaken a source spirit, but the ogres had a demon crystal that was similar to a demon beast's, which gave the ogres great strength. 500 ogres were like 500 small mountains. Ogres wore tattered aprons and were almost naked. Most of them were covered in moss or parasites. Ogres did not have any production capabilities, so they were very poor. Fortunately, their copper skin and iron bones were better than any weapon. Even if they were unarmed, they could still survive as magical beasts, allowing this species to flourish since ancient times. These ogres could run around the battlefield naked, and not die even when their bodies were pierced with weapons. If they could make a set of armor for them and forge an octagonal hammer, the 500 ogres would instantly become 500 armored meat grinders. Meng Yingying's heart trembled. Chu Tian, isn't this a little too much? Will it bring us trouble? If these fellows go crazy, wouldn't the small town we built with great difficulty be destroyed? Whether it was the spirit beasts, orcs, or ogres, they were not races with good tempers. Chu Tian waved his hand in an uncaring manner. Don't worry, it can be taken care of. These soldiers were all carefully selected. They were young, strong, and had potential. Just based on the 4 foreign race army, their battle strength could not be underestimated. Not bad. This was a very strong force. As for whether they would rebel or not, this was not impossible. The Forest of Chaos did not care about principles and they could fall out at any time, but Chu Tian had confidence in stabilizing the 4 tribes. Actually, the 4 tribes did not realize that they had already fallen into Chu Tian's trap. From now on, they would become more and more dependent on miracle commerce, and it would be hard for them to retreat. This was because there was a limit to the quantity and quality of the army that could enter Oldman's small town. Not to mention that after any army entered Oldman's small town, Chu Tian would personally regroup them, and they would only listen to the mayor's orders. Even if there was a special situation, the Berserker army would be enough to clean up the mess. The 7,000–8,000 soldiers walked into the Oldman small town's main hall. Actually, most of the people sent out this time were the youths of the tribes. Most of them had never left the 200-kilometer radius of the tribe before, so when they came to Oldman's small town, they felt this place was very new to them. But a large electric light suddenly turned on. That bright light instantly filled the main hall, making it as bright as day. Whether it was the orcs, wolves, bear people, or ogres, they were all filled with shock as they looked around them. At this time, a burst of passionate music came from the speakers all around. It was like a dancing flame, like a surging river, like a roaring sea, making the listeners feel comfortable and filled with heroism. How did they do this? The foreign races all had faces filled with shock. Welcome to Oldman's small town. I am the mayor, Chu Tian. Chu Tian stood on top of a stone building, looking down at the several thousand new soldiers. From now on, you will all be members of Oldman's small town. We will be responsible for your living expenses and will give you a pill to increase your cultivation every half a month based on your strength. You just need to focus on protecting the small town and witness how this nameless small town rises and soars into the sky. Roar, roar, roar. Everyone excitedly roared out. This allied army's treatment was too good. They could eat and drink well every day, as well as receive cultivation subsidies. They could also enjoy a good living environment, as well as the convenience of the market. This kind of treatment compared to the tribe, it was simply the difference between clouds and mud. Who wouldn't want to live a good life? These soldiers would be stationed in Oldman's small town for a while. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. Chu Tian wanted to turn Oldman's small town into the trading center of the northern forest. This place would become the strongest power on the edge of the forest. Through Oldman's small town, he would obtain the support of the locals. When the time and strength were ripe, it would be time for Chu Tian to compete. When Chu Tian finished his speech, he immediately split up the troops and reorganized them according to the Allied army's model. Then he divided them into battalions and had the dwarves lead them back to the living area. This was a matter that everyone was happy about. From Chu Tian's point of view, 4 powerful enemies had become allies. This way, he could avoid a direct conflict with them in the future. The most important thing was that these locals had lived in the Forest of Chaos for many years, so they were already familiar with the location of the market. The Forest of Chaos was very rich in resources, so Chu Tian could use their influence to collect resources. From the small town's point of view, there were many large powers stationed in Oldman's small town, so it was as stable as a mountain. Unless it was a stronger outsider, the tribes within a 1,000-mile radius would not dare to attack. From the soldiers' point of view, they were treated very well, especially the ogres. It was not easy for ogres to fill their stomachs. Although the ogres had a strong battle strength, there were often famines among the ogres, so they had to eat each other in the end. Just Chu Tian's promise of filling their stomachs was enough to make many ogres willing to work for him. The only thing the 4 tribes were dissatisfied with was the distribution of ownership of the small town. This batch of troops were all elites of the tribes, but after Oldman's small town's evaluation, other than the ogres, The other troops did not even make up 5% of the allied army. Of course, the people of these tribes were very dissatisfied with this. Regarding this, Chu Tian did not waste his breath explaining it to them. He directly pulled out the berserkers to practice with them. The result could be imagined. Those berserk barbarians had terrifying strength that could knock down an ogre, so what did these fellows count for? The locals were shocked by the berserk army's battle strength. They still could not figure out what kind of power miracle commerce was. What kind of method did they use to make these dumb barbarians become this abnormal? If 30 to 50,000 of these berserkers came, these tribal chiefs could only kneel down and talk. Forget it. Forget it. It's just a bit of fame. At worst they would just fill it up with more people. What the four tribes were truly tempted by was miracle commerce's background. Not everyone had Vivian's innate spatial energy that could cross thousands of kilometers in an instant, and not every team could be like the barbarian berserker army, climbing over mountains for 4-5 days without feeling tired. Most of the forest races did not interact with the outside world, so they could not form a large-scale economy. These forest locals lacked weapons, especially pills, talismans, potions, and these consumables. But the Forest of Chaos was very dangerous, so there were very few caravans that would bring large amounts of goods here. This caused the prices of these consumables to be very high. Now it was different. They could have as much as they wanted. Miracle Commerce did not just accept source stones, they could also exchange herbs, leather, and metals. The most important thing was that because they were allies with Miracle Commerce's prices were far lower than the forest market. The four tribe chiefs were very excited. Miracle Commerce seemed to have an inexhaustible supply. They could continuously collect leather, metals, and herbs, exchanging them for potions, pills, and talismans. After selling them in the forest market, they could buy leather, metals, and herbs again. This kind of repeated reselling allowed their tribes to quickly become rich. It seemed like Miracle Commerce was a miracle given to the forest by the heavens. Chapter 376. The Oldman Small Towns reform was beginning to show results. After the four large tribes joined in, there were also some medium-sized powers joining in. Oldman Small Town had 30% of its control open to the public, the dwarves had 19% and Chu Tian had 51%, but they still had absolute control over the small town. Miracle Commerce began to build hotels, theaters, and inns in the small town. They were prepared to turn this small town in the forest into a modern city, greatly enriching the lives of the townspeople. Oldman Small Town's popularity increased day by day. With this speed, it would soon become the largest power on the edge of the forest. But Chu Tian also needed to prepare for a rainy day. The small town was becoming more and more prosperous, and it was only a matter of time before it attracted the attention of the large characters in the forest. With Miracle Commerce's current strength, it was fine for them to fight on the edge of the forest, but it was still too early for them to be involved in that level of battle. Miracle Commerce had the support of the entire country of Southern Xia behind them, but Southern Xia was just a small country in the end. Moreover, Southern Xia was far away from here, so they couldn't send reinforcements even if they wanted to. So, facing the true giants in the forest, they could only quickly develop themselves and grow before they could react. Or they could gather more allies and form an alliance that could protect themselves. Chu Tian. Chu Tian. When Chu Tian heard Meng Yingying's shout, he didn't even have time to turn around before this girl charged into Chu Tian's room like the wind and excitedly shouted, "There are several pieces of good news." Chu Tian looked at her with a strange expression. "What kind of good news?" The dwarves said that they found a large crystal mine in the forest several decades ago. It was around 400 miles from here, and elder sister Nangong went with the dwarves to confirm it. She even took a few pictures and sent them back. "Take a look." Chu Tian was a bit moved because from the pictures in Meng Yingying's hands, there was no doubt it was a crystal mine. Only the oil flowing in the oil field was actually silver oil, which was completely different from the white oil in South Sky City. The energy level of the crystal oil would affect its color. The lowest grade was white, the middle grade was silver, and the highest grade was golden. In other words, this oil mine discovered by the dwarves a few decades ago was actually a silver crystal oil mine. Its value was not ordinary at all. The energy intensity of silver crude oil was about 20 times that of white crude oil. If the silver crude oil could be made into source energy batteries, it could be used to activate third-level and above source energy arrays. Therefore, it could be used to create even higher-level technology, especially suitable for maintaining a large-scale space warehouse. If it could be used to create source energy weapons, its might was not something the white crude oil could compare to. All right. Chu Tian nodded in satisfaction. Find someone to survey the vicinity of the location. I want to know the distribution of forces nearby and the specific size of the oil mine. For the current miracle commerce, the silver crystal oil was still a bit too early. However, it was something that would be used sooner or later, so it was never wrong to prepare first. The forest of chaos environment couldn't compare to southern Xia. Although there were rich resources everywhere, it wasn't easy to develop them. The locals in the forest were very sensitive, and the slightest movement would cause a reaction. Not to mention that the crystal oil was a dangerous item. If it was destroyed by someone, it would be a large loss. Elder Sister Nangong has personally led people to survey it. You can relax 100 times. Meng Yingying said this and then suddenly said, I just talked to Elder Sister. The 2 warehouses Miracle Commerce bought in Southern State are about to explode from all the materials being transported over. They have harvested over 400 level 2 sacred herbs in this period of time. There are over 300 low-grade sacred herbs, 60 middle-grade sacred herbs, 20 high-grade sacred herbs, and 5 top-grade sacred herbs. 5 top-grade sacred herbs. Each sacred herb in Southern Xia was very precious. In a place like the Forest of Chaos, normal herbs and elixirs were everywhere. Even sacred herbs were common in demon beast nests and could be obtained as long as one was willing to take the risk. If these herbs were placed in Southern Xia or any other human country, they would require a very high price to purchase, and there would be a situation where there was no market for them. In the Forest of Chaos, Miracle Commerce was able to purchase large amounts of them at a tenth of the price. Miracle Commerce did business in the Forest of Chaos and had no rivals at all. This was because when a traditional company came to the Forest of Chaos to do business, the transportation, risk, manpower, and time they had to face did not exist for Miracle Commerce at all. The Forest of Chaos complex terrain could not stop Miracle Commerce from transporting materials. There were demon beasts and locals everywhere in the Forest of Chaos, so they could not threaten the safety of Miracle Commerce's goods. The most important thing was efficiency. Miracle Commerce had the space warehouse in their hands, so their efficiency was something no other company could compare to. The raw materials in the Forest of Chaos were sent to Southern Xia through the space warehouse. After they were made into finished products, they were sent back to the Forest of Chaos and sold at a price several times higher. Then they used the profits to purchase raw materials. Repeating this, it was unknown how many times Miracle Commerce had made a return trip for a traditional company. Chu Tian said to Meng Yingying, "Did you bring the materials for the high-grade and top-grade sacred herbs?" Meng Yingying nodded and immediately handed over a list of materials. "The materials we bought are all here." Chu Tian could make a rough judgment with a glance. These high-grade and top-grade sacred herbs were generally used to increase one's cultivation base. There were only a few that were used for detoxification, healing, or increasing one's lifespan. This also meant that after these sacred herbs were refined into pills, they could easily increase a cultivator's strength. These 5 top-grade sacred herbs were very precious. If the refining method was right, Even if it was given to a peak ninth awakened soul layer cultivator, there was a high chance they could break through their bottleneck and enter the true spirit realm. With the resources in his hands, it was enough for him to step into the awakened soul realm. As for the others, there was no need to worry. With the small town's current development speed, wasn't it just a matter of 5-8 days? Go tell the warehouse to leave these herbs behind, I want to personally refine them. Chu Tian did not trust the skills of those old men. Meng Yingying's eyes popped out. Leave them all behind? Chu Tian nodded in satisfaction. Nonsense, why do we have a company? Isn't it just to collect cultivation resources? Have everyone prepare themselves, it's time for us to increase our strength. Also, tell the young miss that the forest has stabilized, so have her take care of matters in southern Xia and immediately come here to help. Without her by my side, my back has been aching and my body has been uncomfortable. Now I know that without the young miss, a day really feels like a year for me. Speaking without thinking, Pei. Meng Yingying rolled her eyes at him. But after not seeing her elder sister for so long, her heart also missed her. Although through the image-transferring mirror and the communication device, they could see each other even if they were separated by tens of thousands of miles, this kind of communication was not as practical as meeting face-to-face. The forest of chaos had already stabilized. Elder sister should have already done what she needed to do in southern state, so now it was time for everyone to come over. Come, let's go take a look at the small town. Chu Tian stood up and pulled Meng Yingying's hand. Meng Yingying's pretty face turned slightly red, but she did not resist. The two of them strolled through the small town's market. After the small town was developed, it was filled with vitality. Especially the space above the mine, this was the largest and now it had become a free market. There were soldiers from the Allied army patrolling the area, as well as several barbarians leading ogres, orcs, and bear people. With this kind of powerful patrol team, no one dared to cause trouble in Oldman's small town. Several goblins were bargaining with the rabbit people, hoping to buy a herb from the rabbit people at a low price. In front of them, there were two gnome merchants selling some strange tools to the big-eared monsters. Not far away, there was a group of rat people carrying rare ores, looking for buyers. All kinds of languages and races intertwined in this small town in the belly of the mountain. These very weak races had always lived in the lowest levels of the Forest of Chaos, but now in Oldman's small town, they dared to openly do business. At this time, a young ogre holding a large basket passed by the two of them. Although it was a young ogre, it was much taller than Chu Tian and Meng Yingying by a lot. Its thick arms were around the size of Chu Tian's thighs. The ogre held up some local specialties. There were some fruits and some demon beast cores. He said in broken human language, cheap. Buy some. Meng Yingying took out a complete low-grade source stone and placed it in his rough hand. Then he randomly picked a few things and the little ogre immediately excitedly gave his thanks. The little ogre ran into the Miracle Commerce Hotel and bought a large pile of Miracle Commerce canned meat. Ogres did not have any resistance to canned meat. The Oldman's small town hotel was already built, but it was different from the hotels in the city. Although there were spirit beasts, orcs, and dwarves in the Oldman's small town hotel, the hotel did not rely on business to make money. This hotel being opened here was more like an experience store for the forest races. The wine-making and cooking techniques in the forest were very poor. Miracle Commerce's wine was fermented by source energy arrays and Miracle Commerce's food was cooked by source energy arrays. Therefore, the Oldman's small town hotel mainly sold large orders of wine and canned food. After the dwarves tasted the Miracle Commerce's wine, they immediately ordered 500 barrels from Miracle Commerce. When the various tribes' warriors tasted the Miracle Commerce's food, they looked up into the sky and cheered. They had lived all these years in vain. Then Miracle Commerce bought over 100,000 cans of canned food. Miracle Commerce opened a medicine store and talisman shop in the small town. Although it looked like retail on the surface, The true profit came from the large orders from the tribes. No matter how much demand there was, Miracle Commerce could always send it to them like magic. This speed and efficiency was very high, like everything was already prepared. But the mine was so small, how could it store all these things? They had been observing for several days, but they had never seen Miracle Commerce's caravans enter or leave. Miracle Commerce's mysterious abilities made the locals feel even more awe towards it. As for Chu Tian, he saw the small town slowly develop in the direction he wanted and his heart was filled with joy. But at this time, this is bad. Feng Kaidai ran in front of Chu Tian in a panic. There are many elves outside. Chu Tian was stunned. Elves? Where did these elves come from? Feng Kaidai swallowed her saliva. I don't know where they came from, but from their tone, it seems like they are looking for the princess. I'm afraid. Chapter 377. The lush foliage of the forest cut the sunlight to pieces. Several big-eared monsters were carrying herbs and ores on their backs, happily rushing towards Oldman Town. The big-eared monsters were a common race in the forest. They had green skin like the orcs, were short, weak, and stupid, and mainly ate vegetarian food. Although they had very sharp hearing, they were naturally very timid, so they were the lowest-ranked race in the forest. They couldn't even compare to low-level spirit beasts like the mouse and rabbit races, so they were always bullied by other races. This made the big-eared monsters not dare come into contact with other races, so they could only steal things like stealing things, stealing medicine fields, and etc. However, the big-eared monsters were very happy recently. This was already the 4th time they were on the road to Oldman Small Town. In Oldman Small Town's fair and safe trading environment, even a weak race like them would not be bullied by others. Now they could bravely take out their treasures to exchange for urgently needed items. What should they exchange for today? Canned food? Weapons? The big-eared monsters were arguing with each other as they walked. Who knew what sound their sharp hearing would catch at this time? When the big-eared monsters looked over, they were instantly scared out of their wits. With a sharp cry, they turned to run. In Oldman Small Town's canyon, there were beautiful and elegant snow-white unicorns that were currently surrounding Oldman Small Town. These demon beasts were like white jade sculptures. Their bodies were filled with a strong and explosive beauty. They were simply like works of art, truly worthy of being spirit beasts that often appeared in literature and poetry. Unicorns were high-level demon beasts with intelligence, so their strength could be seen through their horns. In a normal situation, a normal white horn was equivalent to a level 2 demon beast. If it had a silver horn, it would be equivalent to a level 3 demon beast. If it had a crystal clear light gold horn, it would be a level 4 unicorn king. Around 3,000 white unicorns were neatly surrounding Oldman Small Town. Their numbers were this large, it could be called a unicorn army. Other than that, there was an elf holding a bough sitting on the back of each unicorn, staring at Oldman Small Town like a tiger watching its prey. Those big-eared monsters that ran away in fear? Not a single elf would care. When the elves arrived, it was unknown how many weak creatures like the goblins, and Bigfoot were scared. It also alarmed the powerful creatures like the ogres and high-level spirit beasts. But the scale of the unicorn army was too big. Even if they didn't flee in fear, they wouldn't dare to do anything to the elves. Everyone was confused. On the edge of the forest of chaos, why were there so many elves appearing? The elves were one of the main powers in the forest of chaos, and they did not like dealing with other races, so they would not attack other locals for no reason. What was going on this time? Grandfather, a young elf around 14 or 15 years old, wearing green wooden armor and holding a thin spear, was asking an older elf for permission to fight. We've received accurate information. Little Princess Vivian has been kidnapped here. Let's charge in and rescue the little princess. This elderly elf didn't appear to be as old as his seniority. There weren't many wrinkles on his face, but his eyebrows and hair were grayish-white. His aura was steady and deep. Although he was riding on an ordinary unicorn, his temperament was especially outstanding among the many elves. The little princess was kidnapped? Who in this world could kidnap her? The elven Great Elder didn't need a brain to guess what had happened. The elves were not a race that liked to fight, so there was no need to kill. This small town was just a trivial outer power. It couldn't cause any waves in the elves' eyes. They might as well capture the little princess first and then properly investigate the matter. Greyheart, don't be rash. The little princess has a rebellious personality. Do you want her to run away again? The elven Great Elder understood Vivian's personality very well. To deal with this little princess, he could only guide her and not use violence, so he ordered, "Go to the small town in front and report. If you don't want innocent people to be harmed for no reason, then immediately bring out Princess Vivian. The elves are a race with a long history, so if you don't use violence, then use it. I believe that the kind little Princess Vivian doesn't want innocent people to be harmed because of her." The elves immediately went to report. The elven young man Greyheart was a bit unsatisfied. This is just a small tribe on the edge of the forest. We are noble and powerful elves. Why should we be polite to these lowly forest races? Everything exists for a reason. We can't kill people just because they are lowly. The Great Elder seemed to accept that humans and spirit beasts were low-class races, just like ants and beetles. He proudly said, "It is because we live among these lowly, ugly, and dirty races that the elves are more elegant and noble. So, we can't easily destroy the traditions of the elves. This is the biggest difference between us and the races of the continent." Greyheart's mouth fell open. "Don't say any more." The Great Elder cut him off. "We are only investigating the matter of Aubersen's immortal herb being stolen and Princess Vivian running away from the tribe. We won't involve anything unrelated." Vivian, Chu Tian, and Meng Yingying came out. "This is bad." Vivian saw the elven elder sitting on the unicorn in the distance and her expression instantly changed. "This is the Tree of Life tribe's Great Elder." Vivian had been staying in the Tree of Life tribe before she ran away. The Tree of Life tribe was not an important place for the elves. It couldn't even be considered an elven city. However, the location of this tribe was said to be the origin of the elves and was the ancient ancestral land of the wood elves. So, although it wasn't flourishing or strong, according to the elves' traditions, each elf needed to live in the ancestral land for a period of time. They would receive teachings and learn the rules of the tribe. Once they reached adulthood, they would be sent to various tribes. This period of time was very important to each elf. Vivian was the Elven King's youngest daughter, but she actually ran away from the ancestral land and stole the tribe's elder's immortal herb. This matter naturally caused a large stir, so it created a very bad influence on the elves. Greyheart revealed a look of joy when he saw Princess Vivian. "The princess has left the tribe for 2 months, and almost the entire elven race is looking for you. I think it must have been a despicable human who tricked the princess, so this kind of thing happened. As long as we heavily punish the despicable human, perhaps the princess' punishment will be reduced a bit." "Don't speak nonsense. The matter of stealing the herb was done by me. Running away from home was also done by me. It was all my idea. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Vivian did not show any fear or regret. "I am now a member of Miracle Commerce. I won't go back with you. Go back and tell Father and those old men in the council that I have already grasped the technology to change the fate of the elves. When I go back, I will definitely benefit the entire race." Greyheart's expression changed. The little princess had really been bewitched by the humans. Otherwise, how could she say such nonsense? Damn, these sly and hypocritical humans loved to deceive the pure elves. The most unforgivable thing was that even the Pearl of the Elves, Princess Vivian, had been bewitched. This was even more of a crime. Vivian claimed to be a member of some merchant company and was actually willing to work with humans. This was simply blasphemy to the elves and a huge violation of the elves' rules. No. This was not even a violation of the elves' rules. This was an act of betrayal. The elven great elder's face sunk. If this matter became big, Vivian would be imprisoned for at least 100 years. It was imprisonment, not house arrest. Even Vivian had no way of escaping from the elves' imprisonment. This was a very severe punishment for the elves with long lifespans. Chu Tian saw that this matter was a bit off, so he immediately stood up and said, "Fellow elven friends, you've misunderstood. Vivian took the herb to save me, but regarding this matter, I have already." "Shut up. You're a human traitor." Greyheart stabbed his wooden spear into the ground, and Chu Tian felt countless vines come out from his body, instantly wrapping around his body like pythons. Greyheart's figure moved and he stabbed out with his spear like a meteor. Greyheart looked like a 13 to 14-year-old boy, but in human terms, he would be over 60 years old. He was only 1 year younger than Vivian. The elves' mental growth was quite slow, but elves at this age weren't weak at all. Not to mention that he was the grandson of the Greyheart tribe's great elder. His cultivation had reached the first true spirit layer. Vivian wanted to stop him when she saw this. She was very familiar with Greyheart's methods, and with her strength and innate spatial energy, it was very easy for her to subdue Greyheart. But before Vivian could make a move, the elven great elder's talisman fell onto Vivian's body and instantly sealed Vivian's source spirit. This is bad. She couldn't use her spatial energy. Greyheart's spear stabbed at Chu Tian. Chu Tian's face also sunk. Damn, this group of stupid elves, they've clearly picked up a large bargain, but they still want to kill Father? But, if Father dies here this easily, then he would have lived 2 lives in vain. The demon god's sword source spirit soared into the sky. That destructive might that looked down on all living beings instantly tore apart the vines binding him. Chu Tian directly activated the flame demon transformation's second state, and with the endless might of the demon god's sword, he slashed at Greyheart. 8th awakened soul layer against the first true spirit layer. There wasn't any suspense at all. Chu Tian's flame demon transformation could increase his strength by 1 layer at most, but the demon god's sword source spirit could increase his strength by a large amount, allowing him to kill a peak 9th true spirit layer expert. Even if he faced a cultivator in the first true spirit layer, he wouldn't lose. Dong. The 2 powers collided. Both sides were sent flying back at the same time. Chu Tian was at a slight disadvantage, but Greyheart's wooden spear had already been ignited by the netherworld ghost flame. Such an evil power. Greyheart was secretly shocked. Princess Vivian, with your noble status and bloodline, how can you be together with these lowly races who are famous for their hypocrisy and despicableness? Moreover, they are people who practice evil arts and have evil intentions. I think he wants to use your status to deal with the elves. This accusation was becoming bigger and bigger. Chu Tian felt like he should just change his name to Black Pot Chu. Chapter 378. Could the elves be as rude and unreasonable as you all? These elves were making a move in front of Oldman's small town. What would the people of the small town think? Ying was too weak and couldn't help, so she could only angrily curse. You're blaming good people based on your assumptions. I thought the elves were a civilized and friendly race, but you're no different from the ogres and orcs. The elves' faces all changed. The elves had always been the most noble, elegant, beautiful, and civilized race on the continent, but now there were people comparing them to the ogres and orcs. This was a direct blow to the elves' pride. Meng Ying loudly shouted, "You can kill me, I can't beat you, but I still have to say that I was wrong about you all." This human didn't seem old. She was also a beautiful and innocent girl. The elves had a habit of judging people by their appearance. They believed that only those with a beautiful heart could have a beautiful appearance. It was because the elves had pure hearts that each elf looked pure and beautiful. Because of this, when he saw Meng Yingying, his first impression of her was quite good. He couldn't kill her just because of a few words, otherwise he wouldn't be any different from the orcs and spirit beasts, those rude and powerless races. Yingying is right. Vivian was also filled with rage. I used to think the elves were the friendliest race, but now I feel like I'm losing face. Wanting to kill someone without clarifying the situation, is this the style of our elves? The great elder's expression was uncertain, but he finally waved his hand. The elves put away their bows and he rode over on his unicorn. This brave and beautiful young miss is right. The elves are a just and kind race. Greyheart, you're too impulsive. Greyheart was anxious to absolve Vivian. After all, Princess Vivian was still this young. He couldn't ruin her entire future because of this small matter. Aren't humans all hypocritical? This was definitely the fault of the humans. The great elder slightly pointed at Chu Tian. Since it's like this, we ask Princess Vivian and you to return to the tribe and let the elves investigate this matter. Meng Yingying was not satisfied. If Chu Tian goes to the elves' territory, wouldn't he be a fish on your chopping board? What right do the elves have to judge humans? The elves have strict rules and laws. The great elf elder said meticulously, we will judge this matter based on facts and reason. We will never frame an innocent person for no reason. Yingying, you go back. There's no harm in me going. Chu Tian was very clear in his heart that if he didn't solve this matter, it would always be a problem hanging over his head. The elves were a large race, and even after several tens of thousands of years, in a world dominated by humans, the elves still had a lot of weight. Chu Tian knew that this was a race that stuck to rules, and he knew how to deal with them. The only thing he was worried about was whether Oldman's small town would be affected by this. Chu Tian's mind raced as he said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Elf Elder, I am willing to appear in the elven court to prove my innocence. However, since the elves claim to be fair and just, I can't be sure if I'm a criminal or not before the elven court pronounces a verdict. Since I haven't been convicted, shouldn't the elves respect my legal rights? The elf elder was slightly taken aback. That's how it should be. Now that the elves have violated my property rights, I hope that the elves can make up for it. Greyheart angrily said, Nonsense. This small town was built with quite a bit of effort. If the elves take me away, the small town will fall into chaos and innocent people will bleed. My property will also suffer because of this. Chu Tian clearly said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, this is the result of the elves' carelessness. We are not enemies, so the elves should not destroy other people's homes. At least before the verdict is pronounced, the elves have the duty to protect the small town. The elven great elder was a bit surprised. The locals of the Forest of Chaos were all rude people, there was no one that followed the elves' laws. This human was speaking in such a confident manner, so the elves were not angry at all. Rather they felt that he was respecting the elves' strict and principled laws. All right, this small town has not offended the elves, so it should not be implicated. The elven great elder waved his hand. 1,000 people will be stationed here to maintain the peace of the small town until the verdict is announced. 1,000 unicorn-riding elves were left in Oldman's small town. As long as the small town did not collapse, their efforts during this period of time would not be in vain. Chu Tian said to Yingying, this is a special time, you must maintain the stability of the small town. Other than that, inform the young miss and have her come as soon as possible to take charge. All right. Meng Yingying saw that the elves were not an unreasonable race and her heart was a bit more assured. Then you have to be careful. Chu Tian revealed a disdainful smile. What was there to fear from these pedantic fellows? Not to mention that Chu Tian did not do anything wrong, it was the elves who took advantage of him. I will make sure everything is fine. Yingying, be assured. Vivian also said with an apologetic expression, I will prove Big Brother's innocence. Chu Tian rode the unicorn and left with the other elves. The Tree of Life tribe was very far away. Vivian could not feel it with her spatial abilities, but riding the unicorn made it very clear. Even with the unicorn's agility, it would take several days and nights to reach the Tree of Life tribe. The Tree of Life tribe was said to be the ancestral land of the Wood Elves and could be traced back to the Great Ancient Era. In the legends, the ancient Tree of Life was over 1,000 feet tall and could cover several miles. It grew in the Great Ancient Era and could be considered a spiritual god. It was this mysterious ancient tree that gave birth to the ancestors of the Wood Elves. Of course, the ancient Tree of Life no longer existed. It was said that when the Great Ancient Era collapsed, the ancient Tree of Life was torn apart, leaving behind a complete elven race. Because of this, the elves were one of the most ancient races on the continent. However, because the elves had a long history, this long history became a burden for the elves. All kinds of complicated rituals and ceremonies filled the elves' lives, and all kinds of pedantic ideas filled the elves' minds. The elves had a long lifespan and a low fertility rate, as well as rich emotions, which made them tired of war. They loved music, painting, carving, and poetry, pursuing a high quality of life, so they stood aloof from worldly affairs. Moreover, they rejected foreign cultures and never came in contact with other large races. The elves were beaten back by the spirit beasts and the rise of the humans. This was an inevitable development of history. However, the elves did not see this point. The elves were still one of the strongest powers on the continent, and there were elven tribes scattered all over the continent. They still thought that the elves were the strongest, most elegant, most beautiful, and most noble race on the continent. The Tree of Life tribe in the Forest of Chaos was only the elves' ancestral land. Some talented elves or important elves would be sent here when they reached adulthood to bathe in the moon's spring water and receive the teachings of their ancestors. In the end, they all had to leave. The ancestral land was protected by a large array that could not be broken and was very safe. However, there were no regular elven armies stationed here because there were many other tribes around the Tree of Life tribe. They were all allies of the elves in the forest, and there was a tribe that had been allies with the elves for generations. With the protection of these tribes, the Tree of Life tribe did not need any soldiers at all. When Chu Tian was on his way to the Tree of Life tribe, he also saw these strange races. These guys looked like tall trees. Most of the time, they were in deep sleep. Occasionally, one or two of them would be awake. They could transform into human bodies and could even walk normally like humans. There was no doubt that these were the Treants. The Treants were an ancient and mysterious race. It's said that the Treants grew from roots buried deep underground after the Tree of Life was destroyed. In a sense, the Treants had a deep relationship with the elves. The Treants had a long lifespan, and it's said that most of them could live for over 10,000 years. After a long period of time, each old Treant was filled with wisdom. Of course, this ancient wisdom had its limit. It was not like the human race's wisdom that could be passed down from generation to generation. Each great sage stood on the shoulders of countless great sages, so all the knowledge and wisdom could be passed down from generation to generation. The Treants had 10,000 years of wisdom, but it was limited to their own comprehension. The two could not be compared. Little Princess Vivian is back. The elven tribe was filled with noise as countless elven children came out from all directions like nimble monkeys. They all stood on the branches of the trees, and each of them had pure eyes as they looked at the returning unicorns. The matter of Vivian had blown up. She had now become the villain of the entire elven tribe. These elven children were very shocked. This Princess Vivian, who played with them every day, actually had the guts to escape the tribe. This was a great crime. Who is that person? Why does he look familiar? Isn't that Chu Tian? The elves were in an uproar. They recognized at a glance that the human riding the unicorn that followed the elves back was the human swordsman they saw in the movies, the brave and righteous Chu Tian. Chu Tian, is that really you? I never thought that I would really see you. Chu Tian, do you speak the elven language? These elven children did not understand the situation at all, and all ran up to greet Chu Tian. A few of them even jumped onto the unicorn that Chu Tian was sitting on. Chu Tian greeted them in fluent elven language. Hello! Wow! The elven children were all stunned. You speak the elven language so well. I thought that humans did not understand the elven language. Chu Tian did not expect that there would be so many little admirers in this place. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.